find this weird middle ground. It's fun.
So who wants to open up? I'm not an anarchist either. I am interested, but I'm not an anarchist. So
who is an anarchist?
I'm an anarchist, so I suppose I could floor here. I think I just give a brief introduction to anarchism. Anarchism is, in a way, just the advocacy of adherence to natural law, where natural law is that subset of ethics which is dealing with where our rights come from. So modern natural law theory is based in Praxeology, and it's looking at what norms are there which would necessarily avoid conflicts over scarce means. So a conflict over a scarce means would be something like, Crusoe and Friday both want to use the same stick, and Crusoe wants to use it to spear fish, but Friday wants to use it to stoke his fire. They couldn't both do the same thing at the same time, so they have a conflict over this. They are trying to mimic the same scarce means towards contradictory ends, i.e. ends which cannot both be attained simultaneously.
So just for clarification, if that confused anyone, Liquid Zulu is not an anarchist in the typical definition of the term. He's a Rothbardian, Hoppian type anarchist. So I think something like an ANCAP would be more accurate.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Because it sounded to me a little bit like this was a different kind of anarchism to the one that I thought we were going to talk about. But I'm completely fine with talking about this anarchism, completely fine.
Yeah, sure. That's fine by me. Well, I've opened the floor to the chat. If any anarchists want to come in to discuss this, or anybody who has an interest in the topic, feel free. But we can absolutely discuss that notion as given. That's interesting. Take it away.
So my first comment is, what is natural law? Because I am of the opinion that natural law doesn't exist.
So basically, natural law is just the part of ethics, as in general, natural law theory is dealing with where our rights come from. But Rothbardian natural law theory specifically is dealing with the discovery of those norms which would avoid conflicts. So there are some certain norms which would definitely avoid conflicts. For example, we could say, well, the negation of conflict avoidance is definitely going to be anything which initiates a conflict, right? So anything which initiates a conflict would necessarily be illegal, because that's the negation of avoiding conflict. So any norm which, so that we can have that norm where we must avoid conflicts, or rather that we should avoid conflicts, and that is basically the NAP.
Is that the case, that natural law is the part of ethics that is concerned with conflict avoidance? That's a usual description of natural law. Natural law typically is taken the participation of something in the world in some sort of divine law.
Exactly.
Well,
that's where the language.
It's there are different framings of natural law. I think in general it's talking about where your rights come from. I think the most reasonable framing is talking about these conflicts, because that's where you only care about the law. You only want to get a judge in to arbitrate something when you have a conflict over how something should be done. I want to use a field for X and somebody else wants to use it for Y, and then we have a dispute over this. That's when the law plays into this.
Well, that's relying upon a specific understanding of law that is like post-Ciceronian, sort of a conflation between Roman written law and like a notion that's probably more amenable to like Aquinas and people who are actually deploying natural law in the literature, which is going to be something more along the lines of a natural order, something that's more static, something that like different levels of being take part in as a description of from where they derive their internal structure. We're not necessarily talking about like normative law in the sense of like what you litigate in the context of a community. It also implicates like oughts in that context. So I can see how you can sort of make an equivocation there, at the very least a comparison. Just that framing is strange to me.
Well, I'd be fine calling it Rothbardian natural law if that would sidestep some of the religious arguments in there, because Rothbardian natural law is absolutely secular because it's based entirely in praxeology.
Yes. So one thing that I would say is I think that your natural law is not natural, because what natural implies is that it can be found in nature in some kind of sense, right? It can be found in nature, and I think that your law cannot be found in nature because it presumes a set of social a social context with a set of social features that are not natural. Okay, they are. I mean, I want to say, because I don't think that there is this distinction, this critical distinction between social and natural things, because the social obviously derives from the natural. But in your sense, I think that by calling it natural, you are giving it more credence than I think it actually deserves, because it's certainly your opinion about what we should do in certain occasions, and it determine and that opinion is determined by a certain social context. Because I would say that some conflicts. Okay, so you were saying that all conflicts should be abolished, right?
We should avoid conflict specifically.
Okay, we should avoid. So should we give the means of production to the workers?
I mean, that wouldn't be inherent in avoiding of conflict, so not necessarily. Only if the means of production are being traded towards given workers.
Well, I mean, that would certainly solve one crucial conflict in our society, which is class conflict.
See, here's where the Marxists slip up. Hoppe he talks about this a lot, where he goes over how each of the Marxist theses, i.e., there is a class, the history can be described as class struggles. There's a class of exploiters and exploited, and it depends on the class consciousness whether you can overcome these class struggles, right? But he points out that the Marxists argue for these theses from a patently absurd exploitation theory. So it's because they apply these theses and they argue them in a absurd manner, that's where they slip up. So there is actually a class of exploiters and exploited, namely the state and the people who are not part of the state, i.e. the anti-productive sector and the productive sector of the economy. So
but
that's
the
exploiters
state
and exploited.
does productive stuff. The state obviously does productive stuff. I would like to say one thing before continuing to another argument, and I'm very sorry for interrupting you. So you were claiming that it's a slip up. The theory of exploitation is a slip up, and here let's focus on this a little bit before we move on, because I think this is a critical point. The theory of exploitation is not a moral theory. It's a theory that describes a conflict that exists in the world, that we can observe, that we can test, that we can measure. Okay, and this is part of what in a classical and Marxian political economy we do. We try to measure the extent of exploitation, and the way in which we define exploitation is the creation of value beyond what is needed for the reproduction of the labor of the labor force, of labor power. Okay, and that is something that exists, that is empirical. And the next thing is, okay, this exploitation creates a conflict, and this conflict is existent. Okay, this is a conflict that actually exists and that we can still also measure and see the effects of, because there is an interest, okay, which is the interest of the people that own the means of production, which is to extend this surplus value, because to the extent that they can further increase surplus value, their profitability also increases. And then there is the other side of this equation, which is the workers, whose interest is not to create more surplus value, but to create more value that could be directed toward themselves. So in this sense, this is an actual conflict that the theory of exploitation describes quite accurately, in my opinion, that we can test empirically, and that actually exists. So this is something that you have to contend. This is not a slip-up. This is an actual
basically,
a key thing to understand within Marxism, like put very simply, it's the study of contradictions that emerge within modes of production, and the subsequent transition between modes of production is through the resolution of those contradictions. Like that's a key aspect. Marxists tend to present the idea that exploitation is the dominant form of contradiction that exists in those modes of productions. But it isn't always the case. It just tends to be the most dominant and is the most dominant contradiction in modern society. Like that's a key thing.
Before we continue, welcome, Calamaeus. How are you doing?
Well, at least you didn't call me Connie this time.
Oh, hi, Connie.
I am Calamaeus, Grammar Kami. I'm on the server. I am not an anarchist. I am somewhat familiar with two anarchist thinkers, Bakunin and Bookchin. To my knowledge, Liquid Zulu is being somewhat narrow in his definition of anarchism. Anarchism primarily, as I understand it, is concerned with just hierarchies and unjust hierarchies. So a just hierarchy would be something like a hierarchy of expertise. Bakunin makes this point. It's the bootmaker analogy, where he would defer to the bootmaker on how to make boots. Whereas an unjust hierarchy would be the state, broadly speaking.
And why would the state be an unjust? I mean, like, even before we get there, I do want to touch on that question, but I do want to give Liquid Zulu the time to respond to what we criticized him for just now. You know,
I'm sorry. I apologize.
So basically, you were saying that your theory of exploitation is not a slip up because it's not a moral theory; it's an empirical thing where you can actually go out and measure this. But it's certainly a legal theory. It's certainly based in the law, because you're saying exploitation, it's an illegal thing.
No, it's not illegal. It's very legal indeed. Like,
well, no, I mean in a natural law sense. I should be clear here. When I say,
but I don't believe in natural laws.
Yeah, but when I use the word legal versus illegal, I'm saying something illegal would be something like going out and murder. It's something that you think should be prohibited from happening.
I don't think it should be prohibited at all.
So you think exploitation shouldn't be prohibited?
Indeed, I don't think exploitation should be prohibited. Partly because
so what's the actual gusto? What are you actually saying should be done about any of these things? Just criticize them? Just get annoyed about them?
No, absolutely not. I mean, we can get rid of a big amount of the tension that exists in society today by socializing the means of production, because from the socialization from the private ownership of the means of production comes a critical conflict, okay, which is class conflict in our societies, that creates a lot of phenomena that we think could be improved upon. Okay, it's not that it's the end all be all, but we think that we could improve upon this social phenomena that emerges from this class conflict by getting rid of that class conflict by socializing the means of production. Now, I don't think that it should be made illegal to engage in the creation of goods and services above and beyond what is needed for the reproduction of the people that create them, in part because that is what every society needs to do. Every society needs to have people that produce more than what they consume in order for that society to be functional. So that is something that I believe in. Now, what I believe in is that it is the workers themselves that should have a say, a very critical say on the way in which this surplus that is created is directed, where it is directed, how it is directed. I think that tension created around the creation and distribution of surplus value in capitalist societies, I think that is what we can get rid of, but obviously not about exploitation in general, because that is natural. That is something that is always going to happen. Exploitation is never going to go away. Now, the capitalist form of exploitation, yes. Exploitation in general, no.
Right, so you were talking about the Marxist theory of class conflict there, but my point is that the Marxist theory of class conflict is based on their exploitation theory, which is itself incoherent, because they deem that if you're having like this surplus value taken from your labor, then it's in some way theft. But this is not true, because you have differences in time preference. See, Marx does not take into account either subjective theory of value or time preference. So it's a completely incoherent theory right from the offset, right? It's you're not taking from the workers, you are providing to the workers the good in the present, which they value higher than the good in the future, which you value higher.
First of all, how do you know this? Okay, this is something that I always say to people that subscribe to a subjective theory of whatever, because now you made a whipping claim. Okay, to me this claim is incredibly unsupported, which is the claim that workers have a lower time preference than capitalists. How have you tested for this?
You don't need to test for it. You know it based on the fact that the trade went forth, that they must value the good more highly in the present than in the future.
So you're assuming it.
No, I'm not assuming it. By the fact that the trade went forth, it necessarily has to be the case.
No.
This is to do with the mutual profit in trade. So let's say I buy a hot dog from a hot dog vendor for $5, right? I necessarily had to value that hot dog more than the $5, and the hot dog vendor necessarily had to value the $5 more than the hot dog, or else one of us wouldn't agree to it. If either of us didn't have that reverse valuation, we wouldn't agree to the trade.
Suppose, though, Liquid, suppose for argument's sake that the only food available in a space was hot dogs, and all of the hot dog vendors got together to insist upon a particular price, would that then, by the mere fact that all of the hot dogs available were at a particular high cost, would that determine exactly what the value of those hot dogs were, or would that just be the result of basically a cabal brute forcing other people into accepting whatever price they set?
Well, then there's two things I'd like to say about this. First of all, it would still be the case if I went ahead and traded with this high-priced hot dog that I must still value that hot dog more than
Why?
the price I gave up for it. Because or else I wouldn't agree to
No.
trade.
Hang on. Slow down. That's a separate question. We're not talking about whether or not you value the price of the hot dog over your life. We're talking about
I'm
whether
saying
or
I
not
value
the
the
price
hot
of the
dog
hot
more
dog.
than the price I paid for it. However much money I paid for it, I must
Sure,
value
but that's
that less than the hot
but
dog.
we're not talking here about whether or not you can be pushed because you ultimately value some of your resources simply less. We're talking about whether the price that is set and your acquiescence to that price sets a specific value to that hot dog.
I'm not saying it sets a value to that hot dog because I'm saying value.
Well, you
is
must be
subjective.
because we're
I don't think the value.
Well, no,
the
hang on,
value
slow
is
down,
good
slow down,
is
Cowboy.
what it's paid
You're
for.
saying that the fact that exchange takes place means that there is parity there, but that's
No,
not
I'm saying
how
there's
that
not
works.
parity. There is a reverse of the valuations. I value the hot dog more than the $5, and the hot dog vendor values the $5 more than the hot dog. We have completely different scales of value here.
So
I'm not saying the value of the hot dog is $5. I'm saying that I value it more than $5, and the hot dog vendor values
How
it
does
less
that bear
than
on a question
$5.
of exploitation?
Well, because
So then-
this is how we get into exploitation again, because there's this necessary, reverse valuation going on, and then we go right. Well, we're going to have this.
No.
trade go
The
forth
bare fact that
where-
different parties in an exchange have different circumstances that tend them towards different decisions in an exchange and to value things, even if it's reciprocal, that doesn't mean that one party isn't exploiting a situation to extract.
Right, but then we
acquiescence by the other
go
party.
into what it means to exploit someone. If
That
you have
would
this
be it. That
voluntary
would be it.
trade,
No.
if you have this
Exploitation is when
voluntary
you're.
trade, how does that mean
No,
you're
no.
being
no
exploited?
trade is voluntary.
No.
That-
Hang on.
that we-
I'll let you do this in a second, Victor. But hang on a second. That's what exploitation is. You're using a circumstance, in this particular case, one that is contrived by one party in an exchange, to force the hand of another one to your advantage and not to their relative advantage. That's what exploitation is.
So you use the circumstances that the other person is in to
Yes.
make a trade with them. How that is, everyone does that, and every time they have a trade. With the hot
Yes,
dog vendor
yes.
is
So look,
trading
hang on,
with me. They're
slow down.
taking advantage of the
So
fact
if
that
you
I'm
were,
hungry and want a hot
if you
dog.
were on the moon, and there was no history, and everyone just arrived there, the bare fact that you came with more than the other party and you had stuff they needed, so they had to accept your terms, that would at the very least be fair. But we're talking about a situation which the advantage that one party has is not due to people simply arriving at some terra nova and happening upon it first. We're talking about people happening upon superior means by dint of conquest and theft.
No,
So
not
it's not
conquest
the
and
same.
theft. Not
Yes.
conquest and theft.
What continent am I calling you from?
The state's conquest and theft. I completely agree. That's why
No,
I'm the anarchist
I'm
here. The state's the ones who are engaging in conquest and theft. I'm talking about free market, where you don't have any conquest or theft.
so you're talking about a society on the moon. You're not talking about a place with history.
Okay, irrelevant. I'm against the conquest and theft. You're for it. You're not the anarchist here.
Can I propose a practical scenario that I think gets into free market here in a post-colonial country? Okay. I live in Ireland. We used to be a colony. We won our independence in 1922. At the moment, we are in the middle of a fucking horrible housing crisis. We are not subject to colonial pressures in the way that we would have at the time, because we are an active participant in the EU exploitation of Africa and a lot of other countries. But our housing market, because of free market economics, is currently being completely saturated by foreign investment funds. A lot of houses are bought the moment they're built by Dutch and American pension funds. Is there exploitation happening here? the Irish homeowner is never even given the opportunity to enter into the trade because they're economically priced out of the bidding prices because foreign companies simply outbid them. Is exploitation occurring here in a free market context?
I just wonder how you would determine that this is because of free market econ rather than because of the existence of the state, because
I'm not arguing.
Ireland
I'm not
is
arguing
scarcely a
it's,
free market.
It's because of free market. I'm saying it's occurring within a free market.
It's not a free market, though. You have the Irish government there. I'm pretty sure they have a central bank, or at least the EU central bank, right? That's hardly a free market.
Okay, so none of your critiques of
Kenzie.
Marxism apply because every single critique you gave existed within exchanges of money that existed within state structures. So you've invalidated your own point.
How
If I
have
may.
It existed within state structures, exactly, which makes it not a free market.
Yeah, but you were arguing that Marxism slips up because people are voluntary.
And I was arguing that
Yeah,
Marxism
hang
slips
on.
up because they have a patently absurd exploitation theory. It had nothing to do with them being a
But-
free market.
Yeah, Zan, hang on a sec. Hang on a sec. You were objecting to Victor's account of exploitation. We weren't talking about the state yet.
Yeah, so can I say something? Because okay, so we have gotten lost. Okay, the plot has gotten lost. The point at the beginning of this conversation was that the Marxist theory of exploitation is flawed, and I was saying that the Marxist theory of exploitation is not flawed because it's not a moral theory. Because remember what I said, it is a theory about empirical stuff that we can observe, that we can measure. And that empirical stuff is surplus value creation, surplus value extraction, and surplus value distribution. Okay. Now, this is irrespective of whether or not the contracts are voluntary or not. Now, first of all, this is irrespective of it. Okay. So the theory of exploitation is still correct, even if we were to grant everything you said about time preferences and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, let's get to that second part, which again doesn't deny the first part, which is the one that we established already, which is the factual accuracy of the theory of exploitation. Now getting to the moral part of the question, first of all, there are no voluntary interactions. No interaction is voluntary. Okay, interactions can be more or less voluntary, but there's no ideal voluntary action that is taken and that we can take as a reference to study whether or not other actions are voluntary or not. Okay, so interactions can be more or less voluntary, but they can never be voluntary or not voluntary. Okay, so this is to begin with something that I think completely discredits the entire thing, because there's always going to be some kind of coercion in whatever action making we are being part of. Now, realizing this, okay, we can never say that an action taken by an agent represents the voluntary free will of that agent. First of all, because free will doesn't exist. Second of all, because no action is voluntary. So then, if we are going to place moral value on voluntary interactions of agents, then it's like placing value on what God says. But God doesn't exist, and God hasn't said anything about what's moral or not. So then, that's the same way, but instead of talking about God, talking about some kind of free agent that takes a voluntary action. This is the same metaphysical, let's say, structure, but with different content. So what I want you to contend with is the empirical claim of surplus value existing and of surplus value bringing about social conflict that we can see and that we can get rid of potentially by socializing the means of production. So let's not pollute the conversation with metaphysical stuff.
Okay, well, I'll contend with the empirical claim, but first I just want to know what your definition of exploitation is.
My definition of exploitation is the creation of value in capitalist societies, because exploitation is socially dependent. It depends on a social context. Okay, exploitation in the capitalist context is the creation of surplus value above and beyond what is needed for the reproduction of labor power.
For
Okay,
clarity,
so that segues
Victor,
quite
hang on,
nicely.
Liquid, one moment. For clarity, Victor, can we just get exploitation as such? That would be helpful as well if you could define that for us.
Okay, so exploitation in a more categorical in
a very general sense, such that
okay, in a very general sense. Okay, in a very general sense, exploitation is okay when Okay, I don't like to start definitions when, but let me do this for today because exploitation is when some agent takes advantage of a given set of circumstances that he finds or they find themselves in and other people find themselves in order to take something in advantage from those other people thanks to that particular context. Okay, that is what exploitation in this sense means. Okay, it's taking advantage of people based on a certain set of circumstances that those people find themselves in.
So when you say take there, would that involve also the set of trades?
No,
Like
trade itself, trade, and we are talking here about an exchange of equivalents, is not exploitation, because when trade occurs, there is no value created above and beyond the value that was already there in the exchange. Okay, when I exchange, let's say, a mug that is worth $1 in the market for a pencil that is worth also $1 in the market, that's an exchange of equivalents. There's no exploitation there. Okay. Now, what is exploitation is when you are a capitalist that produces mugs, and you find, workers in the marketplace for labor who are desperate for finding a job. Obviously, they cannot own themselves the means of production because they are owned by other people already. So what they do is they say, okay, here, let me give you this option. I'm going to pay you, $5 an hour, and you produce for me the equivalent of $20 an hour. And I take the $15. How do you think of that? And because those people cannot say no, they say yes. Now that is talking always about a moral sense, but exploitation itself is those extra $15.
Victor, hang on, Victor. One quick second, because I can anticipate a retort. They can say no. They can choose to say no and starve. Yes.
Oh, of course, they can always choose to say no. But what matters is not whether they could choose to say no, but whether the circumstances allow them to reasonably say no.
What does it mean to reasonably say no?
Sure. If by saying no, you're putting yourself in danger of losing your livelihood, then in that case, it is not reasonable to say no.
They don't have a livelihood yet. They're looking for a livelihood.
Okay, people. No. But I mean, when I mean,
let's assume we're assuming. Hang on. We're assuming a situation. We're assuming a situation which somebody seeking employment is already like not without society, right? Like we're assuming they're coming from some position of being basically alive to find another one. So we're not adding in they're destitute prior to that. Again, we're starting from a situation of society where people are raised up. They're given a certain basic standard of living as guaranteed by their society before they go out and they search for employment. Why? Because society as a whole requires workers. Therefore, it takes an interest in cultivating workers by not making people destitute below a minimum level. So society supplies the workers in that way. The worker comes in with some minimal degree of subsistence and then selects an employer.
Now, let me say something first before that, that I don't believe that all labor contracts are exploitative. Okay, that's to begin with. And I can think of labor contracts pertaining to unproductive labor. Okay, and those are certainly not exploitative. Now, under some other definition of exploitation, you could say that they are exploitative. Let's say, for example, that you operate a factory and you hire a private security to defend that property from being attacked. Okay, those are unproductive laborers. Okay, the defenders of that property. However, they are not producing, because they are unproductive laborers, they're not producing any value. Therefore, their contract is not exploitative. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't get a say on what happens in the factory. Okay, I believe that they should still get a say on what happens in the factory because they work there and their livelihoods depend on what happened there. Nevertheless, those contracts are not exploitative. So not all contracts are exploitative in capitalist societies.
So I think this draws back to just a false theory of value. So what do you subscribe to the labor theory of value then?
For sure, and I think it's an empirical theory too that that I myself have tested and that other people have tested, of course, and that has quite a lot of scientific rigor behind it.
Okay, but we could think of a complete counterexample to the labor theory of value if we just imagined a world where everybody values work where they do very little labor over work where they do a whole lot of labor. That's possible to happen, right?
Yeah, but the labor theory of value is not a theory about how people value things. It's a theory about how
So it's not a theory
exchange
about how
values are
people
determined.
value things.
The
No,
word, if I may interject quickly, one way in which it's been clarified for me, there's an equivocation going on by means of the same term being used. Value in the context of the labor theory of value isn't talking about the preference that a single agent in the context of like a single mortal human being has for a given object that they are presented with directly. It's talking about what sort of causes the crystallization of the value of a commodity to form in a market. It's something like that. And so the term value is being deployed because there's sort of a hypothetical agency being ascribed to the society itself that sustains that market. So you're talking about how do like the prices of things get fixed around a certain central point, like within a certain range where it's
Right, but
viable. Like you can of course always like have some crazy person willing to spend $10,000 on a carrot or willing to charge that. But that's immaterial. Like when we're talking about commodities, we're talking about things that are fundamentally fungible. That's the point.
Right, so then at best, it is simply a subset of the subjective theory of value, but at worst, there are definitely counterexamples where you can imagine a market of people where everybody cares more, everybody wants more goods that take less labor to produce than goods that take more labor to produce. That's possible to happen. It could happen. So at worst, it doesn't actually predict what will happen, and at best, it's simply
that's perfectly possible. But I think you just hang on. I think you just completely ignored what I said, though. Like that is absolutely possible, but that's not what this is talking about.
Yes,
like
I don't
replace the
think
word
that
value
you
with
are-
something else. Go on.
It's saying how much
don't
labor
think-
is put into it. That's what the market price will be, we could say. But that's not necessarily the case.
No, not how much labor you put into it. It's
how much
talking
labor
about
is put into it at all. Right.
yes, in the abstract. Go on, Victor.
So,
But even still, people might decide that they don't want those goods.
But it
even
doesn't
if a lot of
Exactly,
labor is put
exactly.
into it.
But it doesn't
Exactly.
matter. The point isn't that every single instance of labor being put into a thing produces value. The point is that what value things that have value will have an input of labor.
I mean, it might be that one person values it a little bit, and then it does have value.
It
but that's
doesn't
not
matter.
due to the
It doesn't
labor.
matter. It's not a theory of individual preference. It has to do with
But
dynamics
that would
at
be a
a
market
social
price,
level.
right? That would
Well,
be a
no,
market
you're
price.
trying to
No.
argue against a social, like a sociological principle by referring to like individual outliers, but you don't refute a sociological principle by referring to individual outliers. You refer to trends.
Then can you show that this would
It's
make
sociological. They're dynamics
principle?
between various agents.
And how would you derive this as a general sociological principle then?
Can I clarify this question for you? Okay, let me say this. Now, I think that you are operating within a different set of things than I am operating with. So let me make clear what my beliefs are on this subject. Okay, so commodities, there is a necessary. So commodities, first of all, are objects that are outside of us that satisfy human needs and wants. Okay, that's the first thing that we can say about commodities, that they are objects lying outside of us that satisfy human needs and wants.
So, like,
where those needs and wants come from?
I just want to quickly try and build like something intersubjective here to make so I can line it up with my definitions. Would you say it would be like a consumer's good? So it's something which you are immediately consuming rather than something that is being used to produce other things?
No, I mean, all commodities. So there's this notion that is employed by Marx, which is called productive consumption. So all production implies consumption. Okay, because when production occurs, there is a consumption of raw materials, of machinery, of labor power, etc. So all production is an act of consumption in itself.
Well, when I talk about consumption, I mean like consumed by the actual person. So like, you know, in the event of a ham sandwich, I'm making a ham sandwich. I'd need a knife. This would be a capital good because I'm going to slice the bread. And
it's not a capital good. It's not a capital good.
Then I put the ham sandwich together, and the ham sandwich would be the consumer's good because I'm directly consuming it to satisfy my.
But the knife is not a capital good. So let me clarify this. No, it's not. Let me clarify this. Okay, so value. Okay, so I was defining a commodity first of all. Okay, now commodities are objects that are outside of us that satisfy human needs and wants, wherever those needs and wants come from, we don't care. They satisfy them.
Victor, I'm gonna stop you there for a
Yes.
second, because I think a fundamental confusion here is that Liquid is talking about individual objects that are presented as individualities in front of you. He's saying the knife, the sandwich. You're talking about commodities as such. It seems to me the disconnect is that a commodity, again, doesn't refer to any particular instance of a pen. It refers to how does society value pen as the abstract category. Now, every single one is technically different. But like a single pen as such, this isn't a capital good. A capital good refers to the category pen. This kind of thing that is in circulation.
And not just that, capital is a process, is a social relation. Okay, and this is very important to notice, because when he was talking about the knife, he was talking about production for consumption, for own consumption. Okay, and that kind of production is different from
It's still a
production
capital
for
good.
profit.
Producer is good, so it's
No.
a capital good.
Okay, no. See, capital
Capital
good
good is just
implies a
something which is
social
used to
relation.
make further goods down the line. That's what capital good is.
No. Capital good. Okay,
That's-
so
it
you're
is.
operating within a different conception of what capital good is. Okay,
Let me
capital
freeze
good-
both of you. Hang on. Let me freeze both of you. Liquid, give what your definition of capital is, so that what are you adding when you say that something is a capital good? And then Victor, I want you to reply in kind.
So basically, a capital good is some sort of good which you are using to attain further goods. And you can have different orders of capital goods. We can go back to the ham sandwich, I suppose. So the 0th order capital good, we could say, or i.e. the consumer's good, is the ham sandwich itself. The next order up would be the sliced ham and the sliced bread. Those would both be capital goods. The next order above that would be the knife, and above the knife you'd have the metal used to make the knife.
Hang on, Victor. Hang on, Victor. 1 second. So when you say a capital good, you're talking about a good that is productive of further goods.
Yeah, you're not directly consuming the knife. You are using it to make something that you will later consume.
But you are consuming the knife when you use it to make something else. But that is irrelevant.
Degrading the knife, sure, but you're not consuming the knife. You're not using the knife directly to satisfy your end.
But that is irrelevant.
Okay, hang on. Victor, what do you mean when you refer to a capital good?
Okay, this is important. Now, capital good needs to be specific. It needs to be specific, and it needs to be socially specific. Why? Because from his definition of a capital good, okay, a Neanderthal using a rock to produce fire is engaging in capitalist production and is indeed using that rock as a capital good.
Okay.
But
So what is your understanding? What is your understanding of what capital? What is your understanding of what capital good means?
So a capital good is, first of all, we are talking about the context of capitalist production, which is production for profit. Okay, and a capital good, okay, is a good that is used in the process of the circuit of capital. And what is the circuit of capital? The circuit of capital is the circuit by which capital revalues itself. Okay, and this process is characterized by three main stages. Okay, one stage is the stage of the commodities. Those commodities appear, okay, to the capitalist, and the capitalist takes them to the next step, which is the step of the production of those, the production of new commodities by means of older commodities. Okay, this is what Sraffa. This is why Sraffa calls his very important good, his very important book, Production of Commodities by Means of Commodities. Okay, capitalist production involves the production of commodities through the use of other commodities, and then those commodities are themselves sold in the market for a profit.
So it seems to me that the fundamental distinction isn't the productivity of capital goods. The fundamental distinction is that capital goods for you, Victor, are taking place within a social circuit, whereas for Liquid Zulu, Liquid is simply talking about the productivity by an agent, their investment, or I suppose you could say, the potential of some object, I guess only in the context of being used to produce further goods down the line.
Exactly.
But the productivity is, so the productivity, sorry, just to finish up quickly. So the productivity aspect is equivalent for both of you. The difference, though, is that Liquid is talking about the productivity to a single agent. You're talking about the productivity to a capitalist system.
I actually think the productivity point isn't the same between us, because I actually picked up there, he said a capital good is something which is production for profit.
Exactly.
But, we have a completely different idea of what profit means. Because I see profit as psychic profit, i.e. both parties in a trade will always profit. I profit because I get the higher value good of the hot dog, and the vendor profits because he gets the $5 that he values more. Whereas I think the Marxists would say that profit is when you get this more money or something.
Hang on.
We don't say that. Capitalists say that. We use their own theory to explain why it's exploitative.
You're not using our theory.
Okay, Zan, hang on one sec. So Liquid, if I am I going to make the coconut analogy thing? If I
coconut analogy, that would be good. I guess actually back to anarchism proper, maybe.
I think we're degenerating the conversation if we go back to the metaphysical. We should stay here for a second, okay, in this particular point for a second, and then we can go there. Like, I'm completely fine if you want to go to analogies pertaining to coconut islands, okay? Now, let me say the following thing. I think that the fundamental problem that we have in this conversation is that we are operating within different methodological frameworks. Okay, that's completely obvious from the very beginning. And what his methodology suggests is an asocial vision of social categories, which is what I would say it's a very bad understanding of economic phenomena, because economic phenomena is socially dependent. Therefore, if you create a social methodology to study social phenomena, you're obviously going to get with the kind of statements that to me are completely nonsensical, that a Neanderthal using a rock to produce something else is using a capital good. Now, obviously not. Now, what I mean by profit, and this is important, okay, profit has two, in a sense, profit has in capitalist societies, because in capitalist societies we can make a distinction between money categories and value categories. Profit also has these two sides. Okay, there is a money side to profit and there is a value side to profit. Now, profit in the value side is surplus value. Surplus value is profit. In an exchange of equal commodities, of equal value, there is no surplus value being created. However, in the production of commodities for profit, there is surplus value being created. Now, profit in the monetary sense refers to the actual money that is in a sense that reflects, okay, to put it in this sense, the real value being created in the production process. That is what the monetary process, that's what the monetary definition of profit is. And the monetary definition of profit is the definition that all economists use. Okay, profit is revenues minus costs. That is profit. And in the sense of economists is monetary revenues minus monetary costs. Now, in the sense of Marxist economists, we accept that particular definition, and we also accept the definition of profit also pertaining to the value profits, okay, to the surplus value, which is the value revenues minus the value costs. And what are the value revenues? The value revenues are all the value that is created by workers in a specific sector of an economy in a given period of time.
All right.
And what are the costs? The labor power and the capital goods costs.
Okay, let's do the reply.
You said there that Austrianism is asocial, i.e. my theory is asocial because it's just looking at the individual. But this is an absolute mischaracterization of Austrian economics. You know, human action was actually going to be called like social cooperation or something originally. But Mises changed the name. He decided on a change. It's very heavy on capital formation and the division of labor. This is very heavy in Austrian theory. We're not just talking about autistic action, i.e. action of the individual who doesn't care about anybody else. That's how he terms it. It's it's an old term, you can say. We really focus heavily on, rather than Crusoe economics, catalactics, i.e. the economy of exchange. You know, and we look at the what happens when we have encroachment on this economy of exchange, i.e. the hampered market. It's all about social cooperation in Austrian economics. This is a complete mischaracterization of Austrianism.
So absolutely not. My contention was not that some Austrian economists have not tried to include some kind of social characteristics to their theories. That is not my claim. My claim is that the fundamental methodology of Austrian economics, is asocial, and that is why you have produced the statement that you have produced regarding a Neanderthal having access to capital goods. Now, that is an asocial claim, because you're saying that regardless of the social context a person finds themselves in, a good that is used to produce another good is a capital good.
So
And that, to
specifically,
me,
just for my edification. And so for clarity, your critique is that liquid is using capital in a way that doesn't require any sort of social interaction. The capital as a category is simply that which is productive.
Exactly,
so
and that is why it is.
So it has no unique meaning. It just means productive.
It doesn't require it, because that makes it general economic theory rather than specific economic theory. This applies to crucial economics and catalactics, the two halves of economics.
And that is why your theory is asocial, and that is why your methodology is asocial.
It applies to asocial circumstances and to social circumstances.
No, because if capital good refers to the same thing in two social contexts, then it is social context independent. And when two things are independent, it means that they are independent.
That's what you have to do when you want to come up with general economic theory, which I would think economists would want to do. But I guess not.
But general that doesn't exist.
Specific little segregated sects of the economy, and they're all contradicting each other, and they don't care about general economic theory.
But you see, general economic theory generally refers to a general economic theory about the capitalist economies that we live today.
Theory about this specific thing. Do you think that's what general means?
No. General means, okay. So one example, when Keynes, let's say when Keynes was writing his book, okay, general theory. What is a general theory? It is a theory. It is a theory about the general functioning of the kinds of societies that we are studying. A general economic theory is not a theory about in capitalist societies. It's not a theory about feudal economics, because feudal economics follow different laws, because they find themselves within a different social context. Now, I think that you are being quite, let's say, anti-scientific with your claim that you can study economics in general, because economics in general cannot be studied.
There is economics. It's a subset of the study of human action.
Exactly, but the study of human action, okay, but the study of human action of Mises is a study of metaphysical things. Okay, and that is why you say that it's general. But when you were talking about a scientific theory of economics, we need to specify a social context.
Well, are you aware of the epistemological problem that the science of economics faces? Right, it's facing the problem that humans are acting. Right, you need to study this in a praxeologic way. You can't just study it through mathematics.
No, I mean, of course, you cannot just study economics from mathematics.
Yeah,
mathematics are a tool. Mathematics are a tool, but praxeology is not there. Praxeology doesn't need to be there. Okay, praxeology is a pseudoscience. Yeah, praxeology is a pseudoscience used to justify.
Okay, hang on. Let's stop for a second. Liquid, give the case for why praxeology needs to be present as the basis of a theory, and Victor reply.
Right. So economics, if you're looking at the general economics, that is, as we would if we were in mathematics, we would look at the general theory of mathematics. If we're looking at the general theory of economics, we need to concern ourselves with what humans are doing, i.e., how humans are acting. So if we get the general theory of what would given types of action lead to, and how would we act in given ways, given action, what must be true, look at all these things, and you have general economic theory. But if instead you say, right, we're not going to care about what humans are doing, we're just going to crunch these numbers, cring, and then we're going to see what's going on. Well, you've not actually taken humans into account there.
Exactly,
yeah.
Exactly, yeah. No, we are in agreement. So let me tell you what I think you are doing here. You are conflating general, okay, with all-encompassing. In my opinion, general doesn't mean all-encompassing, okay? In my opinion, general implies that it encompasses a specific set of things that you say it will apply to, okay? Now, when I talk about a general theory, now you can be talking about a general theory of economics and refer to all human action, but I don't think that is a scientific manner of proceeding in this fashion. There's no general theory of mathematics too, and there is no general theory of mathematics too. Let me say, there are different fields of mathematics, and each field of mathematics has its own theories, and people work upon those theories, and they bring them to higher analytical levels. But mathematics, there's no such thing as a general theory of mathematics. Okay, do you know what calculus was before Leibniz, for example?
I think the Greeks worked on calculus prior to Leibniz.
Okay,
And
but
then,
what was it?
Leibniz and
Was there a
Newton.
general theory of mathematics?
Well, it
Are
was
we
all
now in
part
the
of the
general
general.
theory of
It was all
mathematics,
part
or
of the
what?
general theory of mathematics, i.e., how mathematics works. You know, it's a general field of study. And I mean, you said there that something along the lines of general means a specific set of things, but I think general and specific are kind of in contradiction there, don't you
No,
think?
not necessarily. You see, because okay, they are not in. Okay, so let me give you a set of things. Okay, let me give you, let's say, the numbers that are between 1 and 10. Okay, the real numbers between 1 and 10. Okay, now we can say, okay, that I am going to give you a general understanding of the real numbers between 1 and 10. But of course, not all numbers are
We
within
had
1
something
and
called
10.
real analysis. Oh, we do
What?
have something called real analysis, where we can get a general theory of numbers between 1 and 10, and in fact, all real numbers.
Exactly,
that's what
and
the
this is
real
what I'm
means.
saying. And this is what I'm saying, that in economics, when we talk about a general theory, and here, okay, I don't know what you're pretending, because when I study economics, okay, in any of the classes that I've taken, always I've studied the economics pertaining to market economies, to economies where there is capitalist production. So
That's
I've never
because
studied a
that's
general
because
theory of
the
economics
economic
encompassing
mainstream doesn't
feudal
care about
economics.
economic general theory. They don't care about the general theory of economics, so they don't care at all about Crusoe economics, which
that
is
is
the
what is
simpler
called
case. And if you don't understand the simpler
I mean, there
case,
is, if
I mean,
I may,
no chance of
we're getting
understanding
caught,
the more.
If I
we're
may.
getting caught on a very
hang on.
very
If I may quickly interject there, it seems to me like the fundamental problem here is that there is content in the term economics that both of you think it bears that itself is discordant. Like, I would be immediately a little bit suspect of equivocating, of having any category that extends from the social to the totally non-social, simply because we're talking about economics. From its inception, we're talking about a domain that has to do with the management of communal goods. We're talking specifically about, actually, quite necessarily. The language itself specifically refers to a household. Excuse me?
We also have Crusoe economics, i.e.
No, I'm addressing that directly. I'm addressing that directly. The notion of Crusoe economics is fundamentally not economic. You're talking about you're talking about the resource management of a single agent, but economics is specifically invoking a distinction between inside and outside. Yes, it is.
You're conflating catalactics and economics. They're not the same thing. Catalactics is a subset of economics.
First of all, economics as a science hadn't been developed before a capitalist society. So economics as a science doesn't come about. Okay, economics as a science starts with the classical economists.
Hang on one second. A moment. Just 1 second. Liquid, what does oikos mean?
Not a clue.
Not a clue.
Not a clue.
What does oikonomia mean?
Not a clue. Don't speak Greek.
Okay. Good. Me neither. It's all good. It refers to the the management of the order of the interiority of a household as distinct from the management of the polis. There's a distinction between that which is public, that which is state, and that which is private.
Okay.
When we're talking about economics, the reason why that language starts to be invoked in a general sense is because in a liberal capitalist context, you have a firm distinction between the public and the private. And economics is entirely concerned with understanding markets, which are understood to be distinct from simply state action.
State action, I agree.
State
action definitely has an effect on markets.
Simply.
Yeah, there's the political
that's
on the economic
immaterial,
means.
though. The domain of study itself is not the domain of state action as such.
Well, I'm not talking about states right now. We're talking about economics right now.
No, but the point is that Crusoe economics is referring to the economic in name only. You're just talking about a single individual managing stuff that they encounter. We're not talking about any sort of system that is amenable to the same kind of study.
Which is why it's general economic theory rather than
that's not even general economic theory.
It is.
But one thing. Okay,
no,
let's just say one thing. Okay, we are getting caught up on the definition of general, which to me is something that we shouldn't be doing. Okay, because we should be following something else. Now, here somebody in the comments said something that to me is very clearly what I was trying to say before. The general theory of relativity is not a theory about all physics. It is a theory about the specific sets.
Relativity.
It is okay. It is a theory about the
And
general
theory of economics is a theory about all of economics, i.e.
and
But
all
all
of
of
economics,
economics,
and
but hang
economics
on,
are
but Zulu, economics as you construe it is literally all human action.
exactly. And the way I'm
No, it's
construing
not
it,
all of
economics
human
is
action. There are other areas of praxeology other than economics. For example, there's the potentially a study of games in there. There's a study of war. I mean, there is also, even in Man, Economy, and State and books like that, more specifically Power and Market, Rothbard does go into the hampered economy. When we talk about the hampered economy, that's not economics.
Okay, hang on.
That is the effect on
But
the
listen,
economy
none
when
of
you
these
have this
matters,
outside
okay?
force.
None of these matters. Okay, let's say, okay, let's I'm gonna grant you this. Okay, let's say you purport to have a general theory of economics. Let's just go for it. Okay, I have a specific theory of economics that is socially dependent, that it depends on a given social context. Okay, so now from that particular thing that I'm saying, I believe that my methodology is superior to your methodology because my methodology allows me to study the specific peculiarities of each social form of organizing production, which allows me to study with more detail the social phenomena that emerge from the socially specific modes of production that have existed throughout human history.
I mean, even if we're just still talking about only catalactics rather than general economics, we still have it that it's arisen out of human action. So we still have to concern ourselves with human action in this.
Exactly, and human action.
Don't care about human action at all, you're not going to get anything useful.
Exactly, and okay, so let's talk a little bit about human action. First of all, we were talking about the theory of exploitation to begin with, and the theory of exploitation hasn't been challenged from the very beginning of this conversation. Second, we also
well, it has been challenged.
Oh yes, it has been challenged from grounds that are not applicable to what the theory of exploitation.
You didn't let me finish my challenge of the theory of exploitation.
Okay, finish your challenge, please, because so far everything that you've said has been thoroughly debunked.
The Marxist theory of exploitation, it completely doesn't take into account time preference. And in fact, you ceded to me that it doesn't take into account time preference, and you ceded that ground to me. So I wouldn't say that I'd been debunked there.
Yeah, but okay. So you know what? The theory of evolution doesn't take into account creationism. Is that
okay?
Is that a flaw of the theory of evolution?
Then? But you ceded the ground to me.
No. Okay, so I'm ceding you the ground that we are not concerned.
You cede me the ground that the theory of exploitation should indeed take into account time preference.
No, I haven't.
So you're not ceding that ground anymore. So let's go back to it then.
No, so the ground that I've ceded is that the theory of exploitation, the Marxist theory of exploitation, is not concerned with the metaphysical concept of time preferences. This is what I've said.
That's an economic concept, right?
No, it is a metaphysical concept.
It's an economic concept.
Time preference is purely metaphysical.
No, it's absolutely economic. It's
no, in a sense you are applying it. In the sense
can you define for me time preference?
How can you test time preference?
Can you define for me time preference?
Well, I think we know what time preference is. I want to know what the distinction
I want to know if
Victor and economic is.
Yes, no. Time preference refers to this. I mean, depending on the subjective theory that you're talking about, it refers to this concept that people place value on time, and depending on how much value they place on time, they're going to take a given course of action or another.
Well, not precisely. Precisely, time preference is how much you value a present good over a future good.
Exactly, that's exactly what I've said.
Right, but you're not placing value on time itself. You're valuing a good now versus a good in the future.
Exactly, and what is the main factor that differentiates a good now from a good in the future? Time.
Well, time, but you're not valuing the time.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, you are. Yes, you are, because
you're valuing
the time is the only thing that changes. The time is the only thing that changes from today and tomorrow. The time is the only thing that changes in this scenario.
It's
that
also
you
a different
presented.
good, though.
So it's the only thing that you are measuring.
It's a different good, though. That also changes.
Exactly. Okay, so you can consider that,
exactly.
the same good in the future.
Change.
No. Listen. Okay, let me explain this to you. So we are talking about the same good. So let's talk about the general microeconomic problems that we work with when we work with time. Okay, normally one of the ways that we approach this is we consider a single good, and we say that this good today is one good, and this good tomorrow is another good. It's a different good. Now, the thing that has changed from today and tomorrow is time. That is the factor that has changed. That is the factor that has changed the good. But in this sense, okay, time is exactly what we are valuing, because we are valuing the difference from tomorrow to today, which is mainly determined by time. So if you have two things,
I can accept your ontology of valuing time if that would allow us to continue.
Yeah, let's continue with that. So what I'm saying that with your claim that is metaphysical is that in the specific way that you are applying this theory, okay, you're applying it to mean to say the following: workers in capitalist societies value, okay, time in this sense that I'm saying less. Okay, they value future consumption less than the capitalists. The capitalists value more future consumption than today. And this is the reason why in society we find these labor contracts that produce what the Marxists, the evil Marxists call exploitation. But in my theory of subjective value, this is not exploitation, because to me, there's no advantage being taken of. There's two kinds of people, and both of which are maximizing in this sense their utilities, because they are taking into consideration their preference, and this to me is purely metaphysical. In what way can you test whether or not this is the case?
Well, you don't have to test it, just as you have to test whether the Pythagorean theorem is correct by going out measuring a bunch of triangles.
But this is not logically. This is not a logical.
We've derived it from praxeology. We've derived it from the axiom of action here.
But okay, and you know what the problem here is. Okay, that you are assuming. Okay, that nothing. Particular. Oh yes, you are assuming. You know what you're assuming here? You're assuming that the reason why these things are taking place is because of differences in time preference. What I'm asking you to do is to test whether this is due to that or due to another thing. And what you're saying is, no, it's obvious to me that it is this particular thing that I'm talking about.
It's necessarily the case.
It's not necessarily the case.
It
is not necessarily the case.
Valuation.
It is not necessarily the case.
Let's say we had this offer between me and you that I would give up 5 potatoes today. In exchange, you'll give me 10 potatoes tomorrow. Well, it must be the case that you have a higher time preference than I do, because you value 5 potatoes today more than 10 potatoes tomorrow, and I value 10 potatoes tomorrow more than 5 potatoes today.
Absolutely not.
What would be the counterexample to that?
Okay, let's say, let's go in this direction. Okay, let's say that I have 5 potatoes today, okay, and that I'm willing to trade 2 of my potatoes so that tomorrow you are going to give me 5 more. Okay, so I'm going to lose 2 today.
I'm asking for a counterexample of this scenario.
I'm going to give you this. So the reason why I can do this is, 1, because I value those potatoes more tomorrow, or 2nd, because I just happen to want to do that in that particular moment for no particular reason. What you are saying is that because that happened, that reason, exactly. What you are saying is that reason must be the case why that exchange took place. And you are not proposing any way by which we can test this. You're saying it should be the case because I say that this is the only factor that can produce this result. What I'm saying to you is there can be many factors. Let's say that I was just walking by and I happened to drop 2 potatoes, okay, and you picked them up, and then in the next period you gave me 5 because you saw that I was the one that dropped those.
So let's try and come up with a counterexample here based on that. So you don't value 10 potatoes, and you don't value 5 potatoes now more than 10 potatoes tomorrow, but yet you accept the trade.
Exactly.
How the fuck would that work? Because you necessarily
because those 2 potatoes,
that's what it means to accept a trade. You value what you're getting more than what you're giving up.
No, because you okay. So
well, slow down. Hang on. May I quickly? So, if not accepting the trade means your death, your valuation of the thing you are trading is actually no longer the relevant feature here, because there is an additional calculus that is forcing your hand.
No, that the reason why you might die without those potatoes might be why you value it more, but that's irrelevant to whether you do value it more.
So let me say the following thing. So you're working with this assumption, okay, that it is the value that I place on future consumption relative to consumption today what makes it so that my action today is this one. What if I made that particular exchange?
Hang on, Victor. Just 1 second. This is bugging me. That's not irrelevant if we're trying to get at value.
No, it is irrelevant. The reasons why you value certain things are the
No, because value can be specific. Value can be like what is the thing we happen upon. But the dynamic I describe is one which destroys the possibility of specifying value, because it's always just an either or. Give up this entire domain of value categorically so that you have any existence whatsoever. And at that level, you may even be invoking things that are entirely irrational, where value isn't even a factor anymore. Now, like the usual things that we would be looking at in terms of like the psychological disposition of a free agent in an exchange. Like now we have things like panic. Now we have things like addiction and visceral needs, which don't lend themselves to a rational description of value or of value over time or of value in a situation.
You're just listing reasons why I might have a certain value scale rather than that is my value scale.
Exactly. President Sunday, what the problem is that his definition is tautological. It's a pure circle. Okay.
Hang on. That in itself is fine. That doesn't actually bear on.
No, it's not fine. It's not fine.
I think it is. I think it is to a limited extent. It is a coherent account. The problem, however, is he's stacking the deck so that exploitation is actually logically impossible. So it's a meaningless distinction.
It's not impossible. If you are, for example, expropriating from people, I think that's exploitation. So
can I present a practical example here?
We can actually get back to the anarchism then if we
but you see what the problem is. The problem is that he's appealing to some kind of what I was saying before. He's appealing to some kind of a free will that human beings have that they employ.
I agree, Victor. Victor, we're on the same page about that.
And not only that, but that he's circular.
Okay.
Can I provide a practical example here and just see where this fits in? Hypothetically, I'm working 1 week. I'm working 7 days, and my rent is due on the third day. I value my full week's rent, but I will get evicted if I don't pay my rent on the third. So the person paying my wages says, "Okay, I will pay you for the first 3 days, and then not pay you at all if you take it on the third day."
So the issue that we're running into
value the 7 days. But my hand is forced by becoming unemployed.
So the issue, hang on.
That is peaceful disassociation.
So hang on 1 sec. So you're right, Liquid. The problem here is that fuck, you derailed me. Give me a sec. The problem here.
What I'm trying to get at is time is not the only consideration.
Exactly.
It is when you're talking about time preference.
Hang on. The problem here is that Liquid is allowing the situation to transfer to the valuation of the thing you are exchanging for to the valuation of a situation of destitution versus one that is not. And so you actually...
Because I would rather take the money on the 7th day. That's what I want.
No, but the point, Liquid. The point, though, the point. Hang on, Victor. Just chill for a sec. You'll get time to talk. Don't worry. Yeah, but Liquid. The problem is that this obliterates the notion that there is an equal exchange between equally free partners to an exchange. Now, you can argue with Hobbes that the person who has a gun held to their head can indeed just choose death.
Well, they're not actually disanalogous.
Well, it's coercive in this case too. Where does the need to supply rent come from? Where does the artificial scarcity in an environment where you have to make
artificial scarcity?
What do you mean artificial scarcity? We're talking about somebody who has more than somebody else by dint of human action. It's the definition of artifice.
I can tell you where the explanation occurs.
And you want what they have.
Well, hang on, hang on. But I'm not saying it's unjust. I'm not getting to that point yet. But it's artificial definitionally.
But exploitation has to be an unjust thing, or else
it doesn't have to be. We already established this, and let me say something. Let me say something because I think this gets to the root of my criticism. Okay, let me pose the same scenario. Okay, about the workers and the capitalists engaging in contracts, but let me say the following thing. Okay, the reason why, workers accept the contracts that capitalists offer to them. It's not due to a time preference, but it's due to God, putting into their mind that particular action. So God directs them to do that, And that is why this thing happens.
Okay.
Now you can
Which
ask
is
me, how
why
do you
their
know this
time-
is the case?
Which is why their
Now you-
value scale is as
hang
it
on.
is.
No,
Let's
listen.
slow down
You can
for a
ask me. They don't have a value scale. It's got directly
They
doing
always
this for
have a
them.
value scale.
No, they don't, because
They do.
No, because we are completely.
Do you think humans don't act?
No. Listen, in this scenario, okay,
You don't
humans
think humans
have
don't
no free will. God does everything for them. They're like Legos. Legos don't have value scales. Okay, Legos
so then
just
it's
do
not
the things
relevant
that
to
you.
economics.
Hang on.
It's
Let's
just chess.
Okay, no. Let me say this. Okay, now you can ask
Be
me.
quick.
Okay, so how do you know it is God that did this? My reply: well, because otherwise this wouldn't be the case. It is certainly God that did it, because otherwise they wouldn't have accepted those contracts. So this is the same logic, the same circular logic, but instead of using preference scales, using God.
Okay, hang
Now
on.
this is my
that's how-
counter-argument.
that's how
Okay,
we're
guys.
studying economics here.
Liquid, Victor, stop it for a second. So there's an obvious case of exploitation that is not immoral from certain vantages. For example, you could take an Aristotelian bent, where you have certain individuals who just naturally are not disposed to having the same kinds of value-creating faculties, shall we say, that other people are, and therefore their exploitation by some smarter entity or some more capable entity in some area actually yields beneficial results to both. So even on some argument where you insist that like people need to be treated as ends in themselves, ultimately, you can still allow that kind of scenario to take place, because ultimately it is still benefiting those people that are being exploited to create a surplus for other parties, more than any other situation that's available to them. That's an argument that you could sustain. Not necessarily sure I would, but like there's nothing philosophically incoherent about the idea of immoral exploitation. All exploitation means is that you are making use of something to some end. We exploit inanimate objects all the time. The issue with exploitation in the sense of a capitalist market, or in the sense of somebody with less and somebody in concert with, let's say, employers in concert with each other, mutually setting caps on the terms of employment to their mutual advantage, to the advantage of one group over the other group, is that one party to the exchange is being coerced by a situation that is contrived by the other party to accept an exploitative situation. You're equivocating. You're saying that because a rope is gently lowered over someone's neck and very slowly tightened, that therefore that is less violent than a gun being placed against their head.
So I would just like to go over this cartel point, because you brought it up like a couple times now, where you're saying they're these evil capitalists. They're in consort to
Not
either.
evil, but they are in
okay,
consort.
right, okay, yeah. Just
The limits, Liquid. Hang on.
They're
One sec.
Okay.
One sec. I'll let you go in a moment. Okay. The minimum wage or the maximum wage that you can actually bargain for is determined by what everyone else will offer. So if everybody else is only willing to offer you $13 an hour, you as an employment seeker actually have very little negotiating power, because you can't find any better. So you really can't say no to any particular offer on those grounds. And that's basically it. Like you don't have the ability to set the terms of the bargain. You can only accept a bargain that is set forward. And which, by dint of one party having control of all of the means by which they can offer employment, well, that's basically it. Like there's one party has no bargaining power categorically.
Well,
except through things like strikes, etc.
Okay, right. So I'll go over the reason why. Also, after I say this point, would I be able to like quickly nip off the toilet? Would you guys be able to like discuss the point? Okay,
Sure.
right. So
by all means.
I'll go over why cartels, we shouldn't expect them to form in a free market, i.e. without state intervention. So basically, if you have a cartel, you have this issue where the less efficient people in the cartel are being benefited at the expense of the more efficient people. So if you have somebody who's, let's just say we have a cartel of producing Vaseline, because I've got some Vaseline on my desk here. We have it that the super efficient Vaseline producers, well, they're going to have to lower their production or, raise their prices such that they are selling, they're not getting as much profit out of their more efficient process in producing Vaseline to favor the less efficient competition, such that they can bring up their prices and they can get money out of it. And I'll just nip off the toilet real quick whilst you guys discuss that.
I just want to say a couple of things here. I think that the point that I made should be something that he addresses, because I think that what I showed there was exactly the problem that I've had from the very beginning with his, and that I've always had with Praxeology. Okay, is taking empirical phenomena, explaining those empirical phenomena via a logically consistent metaphysical framework, and then saying that it is the metaphysical framework that best explains that phenomena. And therefore, they justify it morally, that phenomena is justified morally to them because of this metaphysical trickery that they have applied. Now, what I said is exactly the same, logically the same that he said, but using different terms, okay? Take the scenario of exploitation that I've described, okay? That we can scientifically measure, the creation of surplus value. Now, you can say, okay, this is explained by different time preferences. How do you know that it's different time preferences that explain this? Is there any empirical test that you can say, that you can use? No, I know it because if it hadn't been because of the time preferences, which we cannot test, which we don't even know if they exist, okay? Because for whatever we know, human beings are completely biological machines that don't have any free will whatsoever. So by that, those means we don't know that, okay? Now I'm saying that this is what explains that. Now I can do the same thing, but instead of using time preference, instead of using scale preferences, I can preference scales. I can say that it is God that did it. It is God that did it, and yes, it is an all-encompassing explanation. And yes, it is it is an explanation that justifies morally the phenomena, because if God said that this is the case, and God is omniscient and omnipotent,
Let's stop bringing that example in. I think that one's really confusing.
No, but this example is exactly the problem with Praxeology. Okay, it's taking empirical phenomena and explaining it via metaphysical things. And this is exactly what religion has done all throughout human history for everything. And in economics, this is what they are trying to do. They are trying to apply the same religious framework, but to economics.
I think the problem is that we're shooting. I think Zanzi's example was apropos, because
I'm desperately trying to take this out of the abstract and actually relate it to people.
Well, no, but it has to be in the abstract in order to be generally applicable. But I think your example was good to that end as well.
I understand the need for generality, but if it doesn't actually relate to people, then what's the fucking point?
It allows us to think about how it relates to people. So I think
no, then we're in agreement. It has to. We
are. I'm just with me in practice, even if you're disagreeing with me verbally. Liquid can sympathize with that. The problem we're running into, I think, is that we sort of indirectly highlighted the fact that we're using the term value in radically different ways in both cases, such that we really can't say that we're even arguing about the same kind of thing anymore. Because in the case where, for example, someone has to accept the terms of an agreement that are otherwise disadvantageous due to the coercive element of time constraints upon them and dire needs that are placed upon them, incidentally, often by the parties that are themselves offering the disadvantageous part of the trade. The issue there is that we lose the capacity then to actually talk about the value of any particular element of the trade, because the capacity to continue trading at all is what is actually being offered. So we lose all specificity beyond that point. We can't actually talk about the value of any of the individual terms because one party basically has no choice. At the point where you point a gun to someone's head, which is effectively what that is, regardless of who's holding the gun, by the way, maybe it's just circumstance itself that holds the gun. At the point where you have a gun held to your head, you also lose the capacity to then deal with that person as a rational agent generally, because you have no other terms by which to force their compliance on anything. So
I would like to add on that, and I would like to say the following.
I'll revert back myself. Sorry.
Even under the scenario of that he presented to us, okay, his framework, okay, justifies coercive agreements. Let me explain why. Okay, let me explain why. So let's say that instead of being capitalists and workers, let's put the same people, but instead of there being a coercion due to a lack of attaining the means of subsistence by the workers, okay, let's say that every capitalist had a gun, okay, on the worker's head, okay, and they had to accept that contract, otherwise they would die because the capitalists would shoot them. Okay, let's say this, which is not far away from the truth actually, because there are certain cases where people that have engaged in strikes have been met with very strict violence by the people who wanted them to work. Okay, so let's say that this is the case. Now we could say that the workers accepting this contract is because of the time preference thing, and the cause of the time preference thing is the gun in their head.
Well, this is disanalogous to just simply having natural time preferences, because there is the coercion of having a gun to
but
your
there's
head.
no natural time
But
preferences.
nature doesn't
because all
coerce
time
you.
preferences,
It's like how a tornado doesn't violate your rights when it destroys your house, because it's just a tornado. That's nature.
but you see, natural time preferences don't exist because preferences.
Oh, they do exist.
But they don't exist. You know why? Because all preferences are constructed socially. All preferences are. Yes, there are some biological factors.
Which is why Crusoe economics is a part of economics.
No, there are some biological factors that certainly play a role in our preferences.
Well, I don't care about biological factors. I just care about the necessary implications of the fact that humans act.
Preferences are not natural in this sense, okay? Preferences are created and they have causes. They are not an uncaused cause. Preferences have causes. So then,
right, but the cause of those preferences is irrelevant to economics.
Okay, so then in this case, it's not disanalogous because the cause of the preference was the gun up your head.
The issue here is that this is not a free market. This is not an economic analysis.
So you are making that distinction,
right? So
not based on natural preferences.
So we can maybe segue into what makes something an illegal action under natural law, because we've drifted quite far from anarchy proper, right? So
I don't think we ever actually got to anarchy. This stemmed from a dispute between. This stemmed between.
We did not actually.
Thank you.
Yes,
well, that's why I keep trying to bring us back to anarchy proper.
Your Lord and Master is speaking right now. This stemmed from a digression because Liquid was challenging Victor on the definition of value. So we're discussing that. We haven't actually gotten to anarchy at all. So we need to not pretend like we've been discussing anarchy, period.
Well, no, I started off with an anarchist point.
Whoa! At the
first opportunity you went after Victor. Come on.
Wait, hang on.
That's because Victor went after me.
Slow down, cowboy. Silence. So what Liquid gave was an anarchist account from a Rothbardian understanding of what anarchism is, which is very, very distinct. So I'm willing to admit that, but it is Rothbardian anarchism we were talking about, on anarchism simplicator. If we want to move into a discussion of anarchism for the remaining half hour, I am very happy to do so, but we're going to have to start from scratch because we've been discussing value. So take it away, whoever wants to begin. Anarchism, good or bad?
So yeah, anarchism is adherence to natural law, and natural law is those set of norms which define conflict avoidance. And conflict, as I defined earlier, is specifically when two men are trying to implement the same scarce means towards contradictory ends.
Okay, natural law a la Rothbard, to be clear. I want to keep that very, very clear, because natural law means radically different things to other thinkers.
I think Kalimaios should talk about this, because he presented before a notion of anarchism, and we were about to discuss that one, and then we got caught up in the other thing. So maybe he should present the notion again, and then we can start the discussion again from there.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Again, I am not an anarchist, just for the people who have joined since. And I am only really familiar with two anarchist thinkers. I need to read more in order to. I'm apologies. I'm making sure everyone knows my limitations of my ability to speak.
I have it noted down, so I could go over your point if you.
Real quick. So, to my knowledge, anarchism. To my knowledge, anarchism relates to. I'm losing my words. I'm sorry.
It was to do with just versus unjust hierarchies. Your point, I believe.
Thank you. we would have just hierarchies. So just hierarchies are things like hierarchies of expertise, hierarchies of learning, although there would be some anarchists who would dispute that. And then unjust would be the capitalist market and the state. And the argument there is these are intertwined. These are one the same, to my knowledge.
Right, so I could reframe this as simply unjust hierarchies are those which are coercive, i.e. those hierarchies which are enforced through aggression, and just ones are ones which are not enforced through aggression, which is completely adherent to Rothbardian natural law, right?
Not necessarily. So, to my knowledge, the argument would be a student is under a teacher in a hierarchy, and the teacher has some level of control over the student. They can coerce the student. That is a power dynamic. But you need them to have that authority in order to teach.
I mean, that's not coercion, because the student is agreeing, or at least his parents are agreeing to send him to that school, right, to get educated. That's
No,
not coercion.
Coercion would be, given that dynamic, if the teacher wanted to have a sexual relationship with a student, you wouldn't be able to do so without coercion taking place or without
It
exploitation.
depends on the
taking place.
age of the student.
Which, by the way, is directly why you can't actually have actual free exchange between one agent who controls all of the resources and one that doesn't.
Well,
You
no, it
cannot
depends on
have
the
a
age of the
free
student
exchange period.
entirely.
You cannot have a free exchange period because
you absolutely can.
the metaphysical baggage that you are assuming to get to that conclusion is untenable. Okay, you're
Well, no,
assuming, first of all, you're assuming free will.
Victor, wait. He's right. You can, provided you denude the notion of freedom of everything that actually conditions choice away from what your actual preference would be if you were actually free.
But
Well, no,
you
this
are not
is-
free.
No, wait, I don't know what you guys mean by basically this idea of leverage, right? This is not an objectively ascertainable thing here.
The question is whether or not it's leverage over something somebody wants or leverage over the ground literally upon which the other party sits, right?
Which means something they want. They want to keep the ground.
Well, technically, they also want to stay alive, so if you aim a gun at them during the exchange and tell them you'll shoot them...
No, because that would be initiation of conflict, so that's different.
Are you incapable of understanding the idea of coercion as being anything but like a direct use of a physical weapon by one party against another one?
Well, it doesn't have to be a direct... It doesn't have to use a weapon at all. It has to be an initiation of conflict, though.
Hang on. Wait. What does an initiation of... Explain that. That language is strange.
So conflicts are when two men try to implement the same scarce means towards contradictory ends, i.e. two ends which cannot be simultaneously attained. This is the entire set of actions which are illegal, i.e. the set of actions which are aggressive.
Well, no, hang on. When we're talking about... Slow down.
Illegal.
When we're talking about an exchange, we're not talking about two people trying to make use of the same object. We're talking about people negotiating...
Exactly, right.
No, wait.
Which is why it's not aggressive.
Fine, but...
Not all coercion is aggressive.
I mean, define coercion.
To me, coercion are factors. I mean, so this is important. To me, coercion are factors that make people act in ways that are against their better judgment. Okay, this is a sort of sloppy way of defining it, but since I don't believe in free will, I don't believe there is a more coherent way of defining coercion, because to me, a voluntary action doesn't exist. So obviously, to me, coercion in this sense is everywhere, because the free will doesn't exist to begin with. So coercion is, in a sense, every single thing. Okay, every single thing that we do is in a sense drowned in coercion. Okay, because we don't have free will to begin with.
I want to push back on that a bit, though, because we're not talking about like the force of like the coercive forces of like physical principles here specifically. We're talking about forces enacted deliberately by one party in an exchange. Now, if you're leveraging if you're leveraging something you control by ultimately coercive means, or that you were able to hoard by coercive means in an exchange, I would call that an extension of that very coercion. That's the ultimate coercive act to which you have that's the deployment of one coercion towards further coercion. If we're just talking about the bare, I don't think it's fair though necessarily to put it on Liquid Zulu that technically we're all governed by like material forces.
No, but I don't just mean that. I don't just mean that. I mean every single little thing. Let me put an example. For example, let me say this classical example of a father that wants his son to go to visit their grandmother, and the son prefers not to visit the grandmother. So the way in which the father tells him to do this is not by means of pure force, by saying, okay, I'm going to take you, I'm going to bring you there, but by saying, oh, you know how much your grandmother loves you. It would be such a pity if you didn't go and give her a kiss and all of that. That is a form of coercion. It is not a violent form of coercion, but it is, because now the son is going to take that input into consideration, and it might actually make him take a course of action that goes against their better judgment, which would have been not to go to the grandmother's place. So this, to me, is also a form of coercion in this sense, and every social interaction is in a sense characterized by coercion, not in the extreme case, but coercion in more soft manners is always being employed in human interactions. Always, when you go to the grocery, whatever.
If you have this weird definition of coercion, I suppose we can just go forth without mentioning coercion then.
Exactly. To me, coercion is not even a useful term, okay? Because I don't believe, to begin with, that humans have free will. So coercion, in a sense, it would be like talking about let's say Satan. It would be like, to me, talking about Satan. I don't believe in the existence of God to begin with. So talking about Satan, it's, to me, as odd as talking about God. So talking about coercion to me is the same as talking about voluntary action. Human beings just act in a certain manner, and that the manner in which they act is determined by a set of causes, some of which are social, some of which are physical, some of which are biological.
So here's the problem with that, Victor. Here's the problem. So then when we characterize an exploitative relationship as one in which one party is not free, how do you square that with the fact that exploitation is such a universal presence that it's basically meaningless to point out?
Well, because to me, exploitation is not a form of coercion. To me, exploitation is not a deviation from free will. To me, exploitation is the creation of a surplus, okay, that in capitalist societies is surplus value that is created above and beyond what is needed for the reproduction of labor power. And there are different interests,
right,
okay? Capitalists have some interests, workers have different interests, and the extraction of surplus value is the key to this conflict, because to the capitalists, the more extraction of surplus value, the better, and to the workers, that may not be necessarily the case. Sometimes the interests of the capitalists and of the workers overlap, and there is a general improvement of the conditions of the people, but not always, and that is the source of conflict. And I believe, okay, based on my moral framework, that this kind of conflict could be done away with in a socialist society. But I don't start from the premise of voluntary interactions, of free will, of coercion. I don't even consider exploitation to be immoral. That is what I said at the beginning of this conversation. And Marx himself didn't believe this too.
I actually have maybe a question which can get us right hard set into hardcore ANCAP discussion here. So do you guys propose an ethic of slavery or an ethic of self-ownership?
Can you elaborate on what those mean?
So slavery would be where some group of people own other people. Self-ownership would be where everybody owns themselves.
These aren't particularly speaking. I'm not entirely clear what is actually meant by ownership in this case. We don't even necessarily say.
Yeah. I'll
we say, if I may,
well,
I'll let you do that in a second. But just to give you the essence of my confusion here, when we're talking about the ownership of one class of people by another, we're talking about ownership in the context of the the setting of a community where there is some legal enforcement of that ownership. We're not talking about like a metaphysical quality where one party actually owns the other one. If you're talking about a legal situation in which a certain kind of ownership is recognized, I don't think we're necessarily talking about like an ethical situation as such. Ethics has more to do with like the kinds of morals and the kinds of subjects that are generated by a certain community form.
Well, that's not the case. Ethics is a natural law in the Rothbardian sense. To
But Rothbard is extremely unusual.
So ethics in the Rothbardian sense, right? Natural law is a subset of ethics. It's to deal with how to deal with conflicts over scarce means.
Sure, and
I can elaborate on what I mean by ownership. Then
no. In a moment, I concede that's what Rothbard. That's how Rothbard construes ethics, but Rothbard is not authoritative in this matter.
He absolutely is. He's the best philosopher of all time.
But you're trying to convince us of that.
He got me. No, hang on. He's got a point. We have to give him that one. He's got me there.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So
you were going to say something.
What I mean by ownership is ownership. If I own some means, it would mean if let's just have the abstract case. If A owns a means X, and then there is a conflict over means X between A and B, then A is the just winner of that conflict, i.e., he is assigned the property right in that instance. He owns X. So that's what it means to own something. He is the person who should win out in that conflict. He's the person that we should, it would be like if it was a watch and B stole the watch from A. We still say that A is the owner of the watch, even though B possesses the watch. That's what I mean. That's what I mean by ownership. So,
yes, you're talking about the legal. You're talking specifically about like a kind of legal recognition.
Specifically Rothbardian natural law recognition of ownership.
Just to help me understand what would be how that would play out if two people just randomly came across a watch at the same time. How would that play out? Just to aid my understanding.
So, I mean, is this watch like abandoned? Is it just in nature or something?
Well, it wouldn't really, right? Because we're talking
so if
about
it's just abandoned,
for the sake of the hypothetical, it just a watch materializes out of thin air in front of two people at the exact same point in time.
And they both try to get this watch at the same time.
Yeah, everything they do is mirrored precisely in the other person's action.
Okay, so this is an interesting edge case example of basically they would be locked in a sort of stalemate over the watch, where if either try to exclude the other from the watch, like push them away or whatever, then they would be initiating the conflict over that watch. So it would be giving the property right to the other person. So they both have to just stay there in that stalemate until one either ceded the property to the other person, in which case that person would get the property right, or one person try to exclude the other from the watch, in which case the other person would get the property right.
I think we're loading this with a bit too much extra content. We're not really talking about property rights in that case. We're simply talking about the fact of possession with nothing overarching either to qualify that possession either way. So we're not really talking about property in that case. We're just talking about the fact of possession. Property is something that you would get in the event of having some kind of social regulator.
I would be clear. Zanzi's question was actually quite good in this respect because it is attacking an edge case of this. It is just this natural theory of property. It doesn't necessarily have to be enforced by some sort of rights enforcer. Whether the objectivists will say that would be the state. I think they're wrong there.
Well, I guess my question
doesn't have to have any sort of enforcer of those rights.
Well, when we're talking about
whether they're enforced or not.
Sure. When we're talking about property historically, what we're talking about, deeply historically, and the roots of our notion of it, we're talking specifically is the partition between the holdings. We aren't even necessarily talking about possession, simply the holdings that are a part of the law-giving community itself, of the regulating community. The holdings of any particular subject within that or citizen of that. When you're saying that the watch becomes the property of one of two parties who are contesting it, what additional content are you adding by saying it is the property of one rather than simply saying it is the possession of one?
Because possession isn't ownership. So if B steals the watch from A still owns the watch. A still has the property right over that watch.
Why?
But because B was the one who initiated the conflict over the watch.
Why would that matter?
Because that's how we assign property rights in a Rothbardian
No.
basis.
That's how. Well, let's take it away from Rothbard for a second, because I think Rothbard is probably making a mistake then. That's how we assign property. I mean, that's how a society might assign property rights, but we're talking then not about some metaphysical quality that adheres despite the fact of possession transfer to the next. We're talking about something else recording and registering that such and such a type of transfer took place, such that it's invalid. But in the absence of that, I'm talking about only two people, where there is no like third sort of Hobbesian force to like hold them to that or to keep a record of that. What additional content are you adding? Like, what is really different about saying that?
Basically, possession and ownership are presupposed as being separate things whenever anybody engages in a dispute over anything.
Not in any case. Not in any case.
Well, no, in any case, because if we have like A and B, where they're saying, no, I actually own that watch, and B saying, no, I actually own that watch, they're saying that possession is different from ownership.
If they would say that, but in a state of Zulu, hang on, but
then
Zulu,
he would say, no, I actually own that watch.
But
you
Zulu,
don't own it, I own it. Even
but Zulu,
though you have possession of it, I
they
own
were
it.
Zulu, they were referring to a notion of ownership that they would not be referring to in a situation where there's only two agents.
What do you mean by that?
Sorry?
What do you mean by that?
Referring to legal institutions.
I'm not making any reference to any institution.
No. You actually, what I'm telling you is that you actually are, though, because the notion of ownership is dependent, again, upon a record of the nature of the exchange taking place, such that in like a state of nature, say, where you have two parties, absent any regulating body to record that exchange, they would not invoke ownership because it would have no content. It's not what you're talking about. Hang on, Zenzi. What you're talking about isn't property. What you're talking about is double plus ownership. Like it
that's
doesn't.
What ownership means. There's no point in having the word ownership.
Ownership means legitimate possession.
Yeah, exactly. Which means it's different to possession.
But if there is nothing, if there is nothing about your notion of legitimacy to actually compel acquiescence to it, then it's legitimacy in name only. You're just calling it that. Great, you
what
can.
The fuck does that mean?
It just doesn't mean anything.
Exactly.
Well, because you're saying
legitimacy is always determined by a specific governing body. That is the one that determines legitimacy. Yes,
this is
in
why
reality,
it's a natural law theory.
Okay, and this is why you are talking about metaphysics.
Theory, not a positive law theory.
Exactly,
it's
and this is why you're talking about metaphysics.
Nature is not.
Okay, there's no natural right, okay, for anyone to possess anything.
There is.
Okay,
Are you?
The right for you to possess
on.
something is determined by whoever says that. Whoever has power to determine whether or not you possess that or not.
That's just
because now you
get the ability to enforce. It's a meaningless
wait. Hang on. Slow down. That's just might makes right.
Mm-hmm.
We're running with that.
But I'm not making a moral claim about it.
No, I understand, Victor. But let's run with that for a second, okay? And why is that a problem, Liquid?
Because nobody would agree with might makes right, surely.
Well, surely they do.
You guys
That's
agree with
why.
might makes right?
Well, hang on, it's Liquid. That's how might makes right. Might makes people agree.
No, it doesn't make them agree. It coerces them into acquiescing.
Into acquiescence.
I mean,
which
you don't
is
know
a
how
synonym
politics works.
for.
You don't know how politics works.
So your form might makes right. So if I go and stab a woman to death, I had the right to do that because I overcame her.
No. In the context of hang on. In the
not that doesn't make it right.
Not in the context. No, Liquid.
If you are in a conflict with somebody with a watch,
I was just speaking. Hang on, Zen. Hang on 1 second, please. Liquid. In a right is downstream from a social body that establishes right. In the absence, yes,
it's natural.
It is. Really, where we are an evolved
rights.
species that ate other species alive in order to get to where we are.
Okay, they didn't have rights.
What?
They didn't have rights.
And who determines that we have rights and other species don't?
Nature.
Nature determines
nature?
If only it was called I don't know, natural.
What happens if you substitute?
Have you asked nature? Have you talked?
Guys.
Have you spoken to nature to ask?
Sunday, if you want a one-on-one, just get people for a one-on-one. Don't host a panel if you don't want other people talking.
No, it's just like we're all talking at once, so like one at a time. This runs the way I run debates. Like I if I tell you it's your turn, it's your turn. Zenzi, did you want to say something?
It's gone from my. Oh no, I remember. Yeah, no, it's completely gone from me.
If I may, I could try to bring it back around to the watch example.
Sure.
So, I think the central question here would be, in the example of the watch, absent a legal state institution or a governing body or some kind of social institution call upon to mediate this dispute. Sans that, who determines who owns the watch?
Nature. I think
But
I did actually describe it as a natural law theory. Oh, wait, yeah, I did.
But have you spoken to nature? Have you asked her about what
If
she
No, I
thinks?
determined it.
If I
Oh,
may.
you determine it yourself, then it's not nature.
No, it's
I
nature.
may-
I determined it based on the logical
But
prerequisites.
do you pray?
that
Do you
I
pray
have
to
set
nature?
forth.
Do you pray every day so that she
I don't think you understand what nature means. Just as physics is a natural theory of how the world works, and mathematics is a natural theory of how the world works,
Yeah, but
they
you
didn't
are
pray
employing
to
nature in a different
nature to
manner.
find this out. They determined it based on some prerequisites.
Exactly, and
Yeah,
that's
but
what
they
I'm
don't-
asking you. And you are not, but physics
I've
is an
given you the
empirical
logical
science.
prerequisites
Yeah,
many
both
times.
physics
Exactly,
and
and physics
mathematics
is
are
an
based
empirical
off of
science.
rigorous proof. Where's your rigorous proof?
Exactly.
Prerequisite proof. So you want me to determine that it was the given conflict initiation, I get this theory of property. Is that what you want?
Well, you're comparing it to natural philosophy that evolved into physics and mathematics, two things that are built upon assumption not being valid. They're built upon the ability to self-demonstrate through rigorous proof. So I'm asking you for your rigorous proof.
So you want my proof that in the event of B initiating conflict over A, that he
No,
necessarily
I'm
had
asking you for the
property right?
concept that natural law exists as a concept.
So you want the concept. Well, so the concept is that Rothbardian natural law theory is based on those conflict avoiding norms that exist. The discovery of those norms, that is.
Excuse me,
Okay,
but those
so we can discover, here's a conflict avoiding norm real quick. Conflict initiation has to be illegal because we want conflict avoidance, and the negation of conflict avoidance is conflict initiation. Oh, wait a minute. That was the NEP. Oh, shit, I've got it all.
So where
If I may-
so where has law come into this?
Law is dealing with that those set of disputes over scarce means, i.e. conflicts. The law is dealing with those conflicts, how to resolve those conflicts. Namely,
if I may-
Rothbardian natural law theory says we should avoid these conflicts.
So if I'm fighting with somebody over resources and I use force to dispossess them of their life, nature will stop me.
I
Like,
never
I will
said
be-
that.
I will be out of
It's a
accordance with
normative
nature,
science. You're
and I will be stopped.
you are able, right? This is the distinction between a normative science and a physical science. A
Well, then
physical
don't make
science, you could
comparisons
not,
with physical sciences.
it's still a science, right? You
That is
can
such
violate.
that is
you
such a
can-
porous
you
argument.
you can
Compare
violate,
like for like.
You can violate the laws in a normative science, but you can't violate them in a physical science. It's just impossible to do so. I mean, I can compare it if you want. It would be similar to say that you could not object to punishment based on those violations of normative science that you made.
Zulu is saying that the that natural law, as he conceives it, is similar to gravity.
I'm saying it's similar in the sense that you were discovering it. You were discovering the set of conflict avoiding norms. Whether you actually go ahead and avoid conflict is irrelevant to whether you can discover conflict avoiding
And
norms.
how have we determined to begin with that conflict should be avoided?
Okay, so this is based on argumentation ethics. Basically, in arguing, you presuppose that you should avoid conflict because argumentation is a conflict-free interaction.
Why do we presuppose normative? Why do we?
In fact, a conflict. We are having a conflict right now.
We're not having a conflict right now. I have given my definition of conflict many times, and you've clearly not integrated it into your lexicon yet.
And okay, so your definition of conflict is a pure, let's say, exchange of force between.
No, it's not.
And what is then?
My definition of conflict is when two men are implementing the same scarce means towards contradictory ends. I think that's probably the third or fourth time I've given it.
Okay,
now.
and we are employing the scarce means that we have, which is knowledge and time, to different ends.
Knowledge is not a means.
To the end of,
time is not a means either.
I mean,
actually, maybe you could frame time as a means. I suppose you could, but we're not having contradictory ends here. We both want to engage in this argumentation, so there are no contradictory means. Basically, an argumentation, you're trying to convince your interlocutor through the force of your argument, rather than through force of violence.
I refute thee thus. Whoop. Whoop.
If we have...
Whoop. Sorry.
I mean, do you want me here then?
No, I'm just having fun with you. Keep going.
So if we wanted to have some sort of a dispute and, you know, over how to do something, and in order to resolve this dispute, I wanted to beat you until you agreed, I clearly don't actually care about the truth of the matter. I'm not arguing with you, right? To argue with you, I would have to not try and coerce you, in my sense of the word. I wouldn't try to have to beat you into accepting my side of the dispute. I would be trying to convince you through the force of my arguments, right?
Yes, but you know, there are people that employ
Yes, exactly.
dishonest
So
tactics.
argumentation
There
is
are
a
people that don't
conflict
care
of
about truth
free
and still
activism.
argue with other people.
No, you cannot argue. It would be impermissible in argumentation to engage these conflicts with the other people.
No, I mean, there are plenty of arguments, and I believe that the one we're having is this one, where somebody clearly doesn't care about truth. They just care about their own particular
So you don't care about truth? I care about
religious
truth.
framework. Oh, I care. But I don't
So you
think
do care about truth.
Because
So
we are
it wouldn't
talking
be
about
permissible.
metaphysical things that
So
you
it wouldn't
cannot
be
test, that
permissible
you
for
cannot know.
you to engage me with violence. It wouldn't be permissible for you to solve this dispute with me by attacking me, say.
Listen, I think that a lot of the problems that we are having today with you
Do you
is
agree with that, though?
purely definitional stuff. It's purely we
No,
were
it's not
caught up for
definition.
like 30 minutes on the definition of general. Okay, so just imagine
Right, this specific thing is not definitional because we
it
agree that
is
you
because
cannot. There is
I'm-
not a
I'm
permissible
defining
move
conflict.
to
I'm
attack the other person to get them to agree with your point.
No.
Excuse me.
This is definitional because I'm defining conflict also as something that encompasses argumental conflicts. You know?
Excuse me,
Verbal
Zulu.
conflict.
Do you mean desired move?
What do you mean?
As I said, I am not an anarchist. When you employ violence or force to coerce someone into doing what you want, that is a valid move within a set of desired outcomes. That is, it's not moral, it's not desired by the recipient, but from the point of view of, to use your term, the aggressor, it is desired because it gets them what they want.
Right, but it's not a valid move within an argumentation.
It is if it helps them performatively.
No, it's not, because they're not getting at the truth then. Because if I were to try and get you to agree with my point by just attacking you and forcing you to agree with my point, I don't care whether my point is actually true. I just want you to agree with it no matter what. I don't care whether it's true. I'm not trying to get out of the truth.
I'm saying that there would be different, in that scenario, there would be different ends, but the same activity.
Yeah,
This
there
is-
are different value scales, I agree. It is possible for a person to attack another person, but this would not be an argumentation, is my point.
I don't see how that would.
So hang on.
'cause
So your
if
entire
I'm-
argument rests on wordplay.
No, it's not just wordplay. It's what an argument means.
No, yeah.
You can
and
call it
every
whatever you
single-
want.
No, you
That's
can
what an
now point to
argument means.
every contrary case. You can now point to as being, well, that's not really an argument. because
Okay,
people have
so you
contrary
think it
ends,
is
but
a
that's
valid
silly.
move in an argument for me to just attack you and get you to agree with my point?
Well, we can do so right now. For example, if I allow everybody
Right,
on
but
the
that
panel
would
to
not be an
dogpile you
argument.
before an audience, it would be. an
Right.
argument.
Okay. So if you
They
guys
would be
all-
deploying arguments to the end of coercing you, or to the end.
We could call
of-
it good
of
faith
attacking you.
argument versus bad faith argument if you want to get a different term in there. Where
That's
bad
an
faith
important
argument is where
distinction.
you're just trying to beat them into submission, literally beat them to get
Sure.
them to agree with your
Well,
point,
no,
without
not
caring what the
literally beat
truth
them.
of the matter is.
Metaphorically beat them.
But you have to care what the truth of the matter is in
No, I
an
don't.
argument, surely.
No, I don't. No,
But
I
even
don't. I
if
may,
you
I
care-
may,
even
Okay,
if
right,
you
I may
care-
argue for the
Sunday.
sheer pleasure
Even
of
if you
it.
care, there is
Present
conflict
Sunday,
in an
do you
argument.
care about the
Guys.
truth of the matter right now?
It's immaterial.
Do you care about the truth of the matter?
I have to have a notion of truth even to do that. Do you think somebody in a
Do
state
you
of nature
care
has a
about
notion of truth?
what is true?
Maybe. I don't have
Do
to
you?
concede that, though. I don't have to
Do
concede
you
that to
care?
argue
If
with
you don't care about what is true, what are we doing here?
That's an excellent question. What are we doing here, Liquid?
If you don't care what is true,
But
why
listen,
are we
even
having
if
That
we
is,
care-
Liquid,
even
that
if we
is the
care-
question. What are we doing here?
I'm trying to get out of the truth here.
Yes,
We're arguing.
even if we
Liquid.
care-
I
We
personally care about
arguing.
the truth.
We are arguing, Liquid. This is an
Even-
argument.
Are we?
Even if
Do
we
you
all
care
care-
about
I'm
We
just
are.
still trying to figure out what natural law means.
Yeah.
And
Hang
how-
on,
Even if we all care-
Zan, give me a sec. I'm sorry. Liquid, you are arguing with me to ascertain whether I care about truth.
I'm
Can you
trying to
argue?
determine whether you do care about the truth.
Well,
if you don't care about the truth, you're just talking.
arguing with me to determine that. Well, that's not
I
true
don't
at
know
all.
if I am arguing with you if you don't
For
care
example,
about the truth.
Liquid, are you familiar with the dialogue form of philosophical writing where you get at a truth
Nope.
statement by arguing about something that isn't true? Where you derive the statement from the book by dint of looking at an argument. Neither side is actually developing the argument that the author himself holds to.
Nope, never heard of
These
it.
are still arguments.
Okay,
Listen,
right.
even
But
if
do
we
you care
care
about
about
the
the
truth in
truth-
this argument right now?
I missed the question.
Like
what?
it's pretty easy. Do any of
We
you
all
guys care about what the truth of the
So
matter
we
is?
we all okay. Let's assume that we all care about the truth.
Okay, so you
This
all do care about the
argument
truth
is
of
still
the
a
matter.
conflict. An argument is still a
Okay, right.
conflict.
So we'll go with that basis. So therefore, it would not be a valid move in an argumentation to just try and coerce, in my sense of the word, to aggress on them, to get them to agree with you. Because then
Exactly.
you don't care about what their points are. You aren't trying to get at the truth of the matter. You're not taking up the notion that they might be correct, right?
So let's test this. Between 1750 and 1800, there was 3 rebellions in Ireland because they were under British rule, and we consistently tried to, using diplomatic means, we ended up using rebellion. Was that not just? Were we ignoring the truth of British imperialism?
No, because I don't think the British government cares about engaging in argumentation. I don't think they care about justifying their actions.
What if they said they were?
They'd be lying, wouldn't they?
How can you say they're
How do
lying?
you
They say
know?
they're telling the truth.
Because they clearly don't care about justifying any of their action because they currently engage in taxation, aren't they?
That doesn't make any sense.
Well, it does.
Yeah,
and I was trying to lead you down that
have a very
path, but then
one-dimensional
we
view
went
of a lot
off
of
into the
these
troubles.
conversations. If it's not in adherence with how you view it, it's not real. It's not valid.
No,
I'm
it's
trying to
simply
point
they
out that
didn't
there's a
try
lot
to
of real-world
justify it.
examples that introduce contradiction in your example, and
Right,
your
but
example
this
is
is
when
why
they're
I'm
lying.
trying to go over the argument from argument here. So it's not a permissible move to, in an argumentation, to physically attack your opponent to get them to agree with your point, because then you don't care about the truth of the matter. Do we all
Yeah, but
agree
it
on
is
that?
not admissible. It
How
is
does
not
that relate to
admissible
anything I
under-
said about Irish rebellion?
I'm trying, because you went in a sideline about the Troubles. I'm trying to get it back to the point here.
The Troubles were 1970. I'm talking
No,
about
I don't
1750.
care.
But
Let's get
listen,
back to
If you
the point.
don't care, don't bring it up. Don't
Okay,
patronize me.
let's get
but
back to the
listen,
point.
Zulu, listen for a second. Okay, now why should we care? Okay, so I agree with you that when in argumentation, generally, I care about the truth. Okay, I care about the truth. At least that is what I believe. Okay, and I tend to assume that other people also care about the truth. Now, let's say, why should we care about the truth? Because this is, I think, that the root of the issue that you are not addressing here with any of your claims, either with the claim about avoiding conflict or the claim about one thing, because the only thing that you suggested was that it is nature that determines this, and then is when I asked you, how do you know this? Because
Right, no,
nature
this-
does tell
that's
us a lot
not
of things about physics, for sure, but nature
this
doesn't
is-
give us any moral facts.
This is the argumentation ethics point, though, that when you are engaged in argument, you necessarily have to care about what the truth of the matter is.
Not
So it's
necessarily.
not-
Not necessarily.
argument
Okay,
is
but
just
then
an
you're not
activity.
engaged in an argument.
Liquid. The
Yes,
definition
you
of
are.
an argument. Hang on. Liquid. The definition of an argument is not a serious harmony between your avowed aims and the aims that you actually have.
We can
and
call
the
it whatever you
format.
want.
Yes,
Let's
you
call it whatever
can.
you want.
But Liquid, if your
Right.
argument, if your contention is literally just that, the bare fact that people engage
It's
in
not
discuss-
just that.
Hang
I'm
on,
trying to
Liquid.
get to the point. I'm trying to get to the point, but you guys aren't letting me get there.
I'll let you get to the point in a moment. If your contention is that the bare fact that people engage in discussion at all indicates something about their inner motivations, but then you counter saying that if their inner motivations don't jive with that therefore they aren't engaging in argument. What are you even saying?
Right, okay.
Circular
But
logic.
can we just agree that an argumentation, you're trying to get at the truth of the matter?
No,
Not
we
always.
can't, because
Okay,
sometimes you argue
can we
sophistically.
call it then truth-seeking argumentation, where if you're engaged in a truth-seeking argumentation, that's when you're arguing, but you do care about the truth of the matter.
You can engage.
make
You
that
can engage
definition
in
here?
physical. You can engage.
Can
in
we make that
physical,
definition
Hang on.
here?
You can engage in
Yes.
physical violence to the end of demonstrating truth, or to the end of opening an avenue for truth.
Right, but I'm just trying to get the argument through. I don't care about this semantic debate over what argumentation is. Can we just call it truth-seeking argumentation for the
Yes.
time being? Where
Yes, yes, yes.
truth-seeking argumentation is when you're trying to get to the truth of the matter. So
Yes.
in truth-seeking argumentation, you are trying to get to the truth of the matter. So it would not be a permissible move in truth-seeking argumentation to attack your opponent, to invade on them, you could say, to get them to agree with your point. Because then you don't actually care about what the truth is, because you don't care what their counter-arguments are. You're just trying to get them to agree by non-argumentative means.
So Irish rebels weren't looking to get to the truth because they were consistently cut off. They were consistently taken away from the table. They're resorting to violence because it was the last available means, was them not caring about truth to you.
That assumes
if they're getting shifted away from the table, then the other party isn't engaging in argumentation with them.
You're assuming.
Listen, let's assume that what he said is correct, because he defined the argument specifically to be an argument whose sole purpose is to achieve truth. So then, logically, it is correct that a truth-seeking argument is one that seeks truth. So this is a tautology.
Frustrated. Now, that's a reality. I'm
exactly. I know. I completely agree with you. So the thing is,
I need to apply it to reality later down the line, though. That's the point.
Since we already made this tautology, and this is the question that I want you to answer. Okay, what makes a truth-seeking argument morally superior to any other form of argument?
Well, I'm not saying it's morally superior. I didn't make that point.
But you said that natural law dictates.
Okay, right. I'm trying to run you down the list, and you guys keep bringing me up on an argument.
But you already told us the end
well,
goal.
it doesn't apply to reality.
Can
Can we just accept truth-seeking argument as when people are trying to engage in an argument to get to the truth? Can we agree on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can, but we have to take out that additional caveat that you gave.
Given such an argument, how could
it
be?
You gave an additional caveat. That wasn't the whole argument. Slow down, cowboy. You said
I'm trying to get there.
I know. No. You went somewhere else first, and now you're trying to get there, and we lost sight of that. But that was actually
that's because I'm being brought elsewhere.
Fair enough. I'm not saying it's your fault, but you said, and you can correct me if I'm misquoting you. You said something to the effect of, you cannot be employing coercion or something because you are relying on the use of the other agent of the conversation to attain the truth.
Right. Okay. Right. So let's imagine I look at those bookcases behind you and I say, I think that's made of plastic, and you say, no, it's actually made of wood. And I'm like, well, no, I think it's made of plastic. And if you don't agree with me, I'm going to start attacking you until you agree with me. I clearly don't care about the matter of what is actually true, right?
Sure.
Yeah, exactly. So these types of moves, these aggressive moves, are not permissible in an argumentation. Can we agree on that?
In a truth-seeking argumentation, yes.
In a truth-seeking argumentation, yes, sorry. So in a truth-seeking argumentation, it has to be conflict-free, i.e. I cannot be aggressing on other people.
Assuming that my totally free engagement in the conversation is actually a requisite part of truth. You may be engaging in an argument with me specifically to get certain approaches to things that can then be used for reasons extrinsic to my deployment of those arguments to arrive at something else.
Are you talking?
That's what happens effectively in paradigm shifts in science, right? They're not it's not a natural evolution of a dialogue. Somebody makes some kind of sport.
Socrates arguing with his slaves or something like that.
No.
Okay, so then if you have this conflict-free interaction, which is argumentation, then you could not argue for conflict initiation, because that's a norm presupposed in the act of argumentation, truth-seeking argumentation, I'll say. So you could not argue against the NAP.
So first of all, I would agree. If you define the interaction to exclude in the definition the kind of conflict that you are talking about, then for sure the conflict is not acceptable. That is the same way that if I design a world that it's only formed by cubes, and I say there is a circle or there is a sphere in this world, then that would be a false statement. But that is by construction. So now I want you to tell me, why should we care about your tautological constructions?
Right. I mean, if you care about the truth of the matter right now, then you necessarily have to, because my construction was based on caring about the truth of the matter in argumentation.
Yeah, and it's a way that if you want to win
so if you do care about the truth of the matter, you have to agree with me. You can't argue against me.
So I'm going to agree with you on the definition of what a truth-seeking argumentation is, but I'm not going to agree with you on an argumentation that is truth-seeking if I believe that your position is not the correct one, it's not the truthful one. Because
What do
it's
you mean
a
by that?
truth-seeking.
But like we based it on truth-seeking argumentation.
Exactly, and I think
that
that you
argumentation
don't
was
have
based on actually caring about what the truth of the matter is, and we
Victor
got to argumentation ethics.
But hang on, remember that the purpose of the purpose of invoking this in the first place was to establish some normative principle directly downstream, not from mere truth-seeking argumentation, but from argumentation simplicator. You added the additional
we had to change the
caveat.
definitions because
We
I
had to
didn't
change
want
the-
to.
because
So
it
we can
wasn't
call
doing
it
the work you wanted it to do.
We can call it truth-seeking argumentation ethics if you want, because I don't care about arguing over what the definition of argument is. But that's the point. If you are arguing without caring about the truth, then you aren't trying to get to the truth of the matter.
Well, you
So
kind of
in
do
all
care
these-
about.
so
You
if
kind of do
you
care about
do
arguing
care
over
about the
definition
truth
of
of the matter
arguing, though.
present Sunday, then you have to agree with me.
I really don't, and you actually really
How
do
could
care
you
about
disagree
arguing
with
about
me,
the
though?
definition. You really care about arguing about the definition of argumentation.
I
Your entire
really
argument
don't.
hinges
I'm
on
trying to
it.
get away from it. That's why I
what
gave
should
you
we
that
agree
ground.
on? Sorry, what should we agree with you on exactly? Because the only thing that I agree with you was
That
on the
argumentation
tautology.
is a
that you presented.
conflict-free interaction. Therefore, you cannot argue for conflict.
Argumentation is a form
It
of
depends on how
conflict.
you define conflict. It
Oh my
depends on how
gosh!
you define
Right. So, truth-seeking argumentation is a conflict-free argument, a conflict-free interaction.
No, not necessarily. You may argue. For
We
example,
literally just derived it. We literally just derived it.
You
guys
may
agreed on
argue,
every
for
single
example,
step.
that truth is arrived at via conflict.
We agreed on every single step, and then you guys are like, "Well, Jesus Christ, I don't agree."
I
with
actually
this
didn't
now."
agree on every single step.
Listen, you know what the
I
problem is?
gave you
introduce
guys the
our
floor
own-
to say, right, do we agree with the step? And everyone was like nodding their heads, going, yep. And then
But
we moved on with the
The
derivation.
problem was the definition of conflict, because I think that two arguments being
I gave
brought
you my definition
together.
of conflict. I gave
Exactly.
you it.
So so your definition of conflict, okay, in this sense doesn't encompass what I would say is the conflict
Okay,
and what.
but can we stick with my definition just for now?
Yes. Okay. So let's.
Just
Okay,
for
but
now, we'll stick with mine.
We've been sticking with it for an hour.
Okay,
Exactly.
so
That's
based
the
on that,
problem.
you could not argue for conflict initiation. Truth-seeking argue for conflict.
Exactly.
Okay,
but
but
what
then-
you
but then
presented
to
is a
establish-
tautology.
Therefore, NAP.
But then because then to establish that you can't argue for conflict initiation is meaningless, because all you're saying is that you can't do other than argue by trying to argue.
No. I'm saying you could not
You
argue for
define a-
conflict initiation. So it'd be because it'd be a contradiction to argue for this. So
Exactly.
therefore, NAP.
Exactly.
It's
Listen,
dialectically
what
true.
he did,
And
what he
as
did.
we know, aggressive people cannot attack people if there's a contradiction.
But
whereas the
I'm
natural
not saying
law
you can't
here,
violate this. You guys are trying to do it right now. I'm saying you embroil yourself in a contradiction.
So
So
hang on,
therefore,
so
you have to be wrong.
when
So
should
What-
the
what
we
he's
qualification of
saying-
your point has to be correct.
Listen, what he's saying is purely tautological. So what he's saying is just that. Okay, he's saying I'm going to define an argumentation as a truth-seeking argumentation that is free of conflict. Therefore, the
No, I
argumentation
didn't
is free
define
of
it as free
conflict.
of conflict. I derived it based on the fact that you're trying to seek the truth. I
it's
derived
like saying a room full of friends definitionally has no enemies in it. Of course it does. It's in the fucking terms.
Yeah, but this one has
Exactly.
actually relevant
Conversation absent of conflict.
Exactly.
is
So now let me
absent
give
of
you
conflict.
another
this one has
tautology.
relevant-
Well
relevance
done.
to
It's
ethics.
in the definition.
But
If it
Let
makes
me give
you
you
guys'
another
ethics
tautology.
dialectically false, i.e., you contradict yourself in trying to propose it in a truth-seeking manner.
No, let me give you another tautology. Okay, let me give you. I'm going to define a falsity-seeking argumentation. Okay, as the kind of argumentation where each one doesn't care about the truth and they are constantly trying to obscure the truth of the matter. Okay, and the one who wins is the one that obscures the truth of the matter most. Now, that is a tautology because I defined my form of argumentation to be that. Now, what makes your form of argumentation the superior to the one that your tautology superior to my tautology in a moral sense? Why should we go toward that one instead of my one?
Because if we both care about the truth of the matter here...
No, but I said
then
that
we
I don't
both-
care about the truth in that
But
form
if-
of argumentation.
But if we right now both care about the truth of the matter, then you couldn't contradict with this norm presupposed by truth-seeking argumentation.
I'm not okay. I said that I completely agree with your tautology. Okay, you don't need to restate your
Which
tautology.
means
What
that
I'm
you
saying,
cannot present an argument which would
But I-
contradict with the normative presupposition.
what I'm
of the
saying is,
NAP.
what if I don't care about your tautology and instead I care about a
But
different
you clearly
tautology?
do, because you're currently accepting it.
Okay, but now I do. But imagine that I didn't. What I'm
Okay,
asking you is
but-
not that I do,
we'll
is that I
imagine you
didn't.
In which case, you wouldn't care about the truth of the matter. In which case, we don't have to listen to you.
Remember that the
Okay, but
reason
this
we're
is the
talking
thing.
about
This is the
this.
thing that
Hang on.
we're
Remember that the reason we're talking about this is because he's trying to justify that there exists natural law. But
exactly.
we've established that this thing has no compulsive force.
Exactly.
Well, it
So
does.
why is it a law? No, it doesn't.
It has compulsive force in that you could not argue against it. Because
Within
truth
its
equals
own
Hang on,
law.
hang on.
tautology.
Wait.
It's a dialectic
Liquid
equals
Zulu.
law.
Liquid Zulu. The self-coherence of a logical system does not in itself impose that logical system upon the world. I am not obligated to follow that logic in practice.
Right,
If
you
I
can
am,
be like some sort of animal beast who doesn't care about the truth of the matter at all, but then, you're an animal beast, and, either you're safe, in which case we'll domesticate you, or you're dangerous, in which case we'll have to eradicate you.
who's we? I mean, even in this context of this conversation,
We
I hold
who
all
care
the
about the
buttons.
truth.
I entertain your presence here.
Okay?
By
But
will.
if you're an animal beast, then, go around murdering, I guess.
So is your argument that if you don't subscribe to exactly what you're saying, you're an animal beast? Is that really the argument?
My argument is that if you could not justify your behavior in a sense where your behavior was contradictory to what I am proposing.
My immediate question
it's a
to you then,
dialectically false ethic to try and propose an ethic contradictory to mine.
or whatever. So my immediate question to you then is, why am I required to justify it, and to whom?
I mean, you don't have to necessarily go about justifying things, but we could imagine if you did try to justify your ethic of slavery, then it would necessarily contradict itself. You'd contradict yourself by the mere.
No, you're assuming I'm engaging in slavery to begin with. I don't necessarily have to.
By
By the way, engaging in slavery isn't contradict.
That was the initial question: whether you propose an ethic of slavery or an ethic of self-ownership. That was the initial question.
There's loaded an additional question there that you are skirting over, which is where I'm proposing an ethic. I have done no such thing.
I'm asking you whether you propose an ethic of slavery or an ethic of self-ownership.
I don't propose an ethic. I haven't proposed an ethic in this
And
discussion.
those are not-
then you're relevant.
You are the one.
discussion.
No, you are the one making the positive statement. Justify.
But I asked this question as a way to get back.
You
to
were
the
okay, but if you
point.
hang on.
So I'm asking the floor whether they agree with an ethic of slavery or an ethic of self-ownership.
But it's a false dichotomy because nobody here has actually proposed an objective ethic to begin with that actually would apply in all cases.
I am.
And
self-ownership.
but here's the problem with that. Okay, but Liquid, fine, but Liquid, here's the problem though. You rely entirely for your basis on acquiescence to terms, which if we do not accept, you will simply not forward the conversation. So you're kind of
I defined ownership quite clearly.
It doesn't matter.
This
is what you do. This is what you do. Hey, I'm going to define X as this. Can we agree with this? Cool. Now let me tell you how you even engaging in this discourse following from this necessitates that you agree with the premises I gave before giving this.
On definitions first. How dare I? It must be evil.
Yeah, but no agreement has happened. You're trying to presuppose.
You guys agreed.
We agreed with the concept that truth seeking is valid.
No,
everything else you're trying to.
Hang on. We
didn't
even.
Therefore, NAP.
We agreed for the sake of carrying on a conversation with you in particular.
I mean, if you
not
don't
for
care
the sake
truth,
of,
then yeah, it doesn't apply.
I don't think
I haven't gotten the feeling truth.
I don't think engagement with you in particular, Liquid, is requisite to my finding truth. Which means that my engagement in this conversation.
If you are trying to find truth here, then you could not contradict the ethic I'm proposing, i.e., the ethic of non-aggression. You couldn't if you're trying to find truth.
If by the ethic of non-aggression you mean if I assume that conversation is requisite to finding truth, then I need to engage in conversations in order to find truth.
No, I'm saying that if right now in this interaction, if you're trying to find truth, if you're trying to propose something, i.e., maybe
I wasn't though. That was you. I was trying to propose.
You have to at least be making a counter proposal, or else we're not talking. But I think we are talking.
Well, I don't need to make a counter proposal. It could be the case that you're simply making a positive proposal and are failing to make it compelling.
Right, and then you're proposing that, well, that's not compelling.
Yes.
Listen, one thing.
Yes, you are proposing something then.
Do you think
and you could not propose anything?
Hang on. Wait a second. No.
With my
wait. This is great. So, if I say something effective like, I am not required to You're giving the positive argument, therefore please justify. And you say, well, justify the total alternative. If I say no, I don't have to. You're making the proposal, therefore.
Right now, I'm saying we could imagine whether you try to justify it or not. If you were to try and justify the counter of my ethic, you would contradict yourself. So therefore, its negation must be true.
Well, no, I'm not. I'm not trying to contradict your ethic.
If you did, though, this is Misesian style application of the law of non-contradiction.
You should broaden your horizons a little bit. We've been going for 4.5 hours, guys. We're gonna call it.
My horizons are broad enough.
I believe you believe that. So we're gonna call it for now. We've been going for 4.5 hours. Liquid, you're actually welcome on anytime. Congrats on being able to hold your own against 3 people yelling at you. That was actually pretty.
Yeah, I mean, he actually, he actually was debating 3 people at a time. Yeah, so we should certainly give you credit for that, even though I believe
perseverance. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys, and thank you for having me on Present Sunday.
You're very welcome. Not exactly what we planned initially, but I figured we were doing this anyway, so why the hell not? Thanks everybody. Take care.
Yep. See you guys.
Goodbye.
Bye.